like Bitcoin, given all the things you just said?
I think that it is healthy to have competition in currency. I think that we're looking at a very interesting future competition. For me, it's less interesting to talk about central bank digital currencies. I'm interested in the people who are more oriented toward the decentralization of monetary and financial power, who really want to return money to its basic function of being a reliable unit of account, a dependable store of value. I'm not suggesting that the cryptocurrencies have attained that, because for the most part, when you want to buy something with them, you still have to translate them back into the local currency. And so their value seems to move. But I do appreciate the idea that you want a currency that means the same thing on both sides of a supply and demand transaction between the producer and the consumer. And that is where price signals do their magic if they are accurate and they provide clear signals to all parties involved in the transaction. And so it's very interesting to see how this will shape up between sovereign created currencies and privately created currencies. And you'll get back into the old arguments. It's useful to look at monetary history between Robert Mundell and Milton Friedman, and looking at Frederick Hayek, who predicted decades ago that you would have private currencies that would compete and provide a better product than sovereign provided currencies.
What is up, freaks? Happy Bitcoin Tuesday. It's your boy Matt Odell here for another Citadel Dispatch. This is episode 20. Pretty fucking crazy that we're already 20 dispatches down. Citadel Dispatch is the interactive live show about Bitcoin, distributed systems, privacy, and open source software. That intro was Trump's Fed nominee, Judy Shelton, who sounded like a Bitcoiner to me. That was kind of crazy to hear her talk about it like that on CNBC. Free nations should be prioritizing open monetary competition. Shout out to the freaks supporting the show. It would be nothing without you guys. I want to keep this ad-free forever. No sponsors, community funded. This is how we do it. So thank you. And shout out to the Ride or Die who are here for another live show. Without you, this would be nothing. So our platforms now are Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube as usual, but also we are now streaming live to Bitcoin TV, which is pretty fucking cool, which Wiz is hosting himself. If you do watch it through Bitcoin TV, you cannot use the live chat to be a part of this. But it is what it is. We are working on it. We are iterating, and it's fucking dope. And then last but not least, I just wanted to shout out to everyone that comes in through both of our audio streams, but especially those in the Sphinx Tribe and Breeze and other podcasting 2.0 apps. It's pretty cool that we can stream value directly to content creators, and being a part of that equation with you guys is really special. It's really cool seeing the stats stream in. With all that said, I mean, I'm really excited about this show. As I said, it is the 20th dispatch, and it seems really fitting that we have Adam Back here, a legend in the space and co-founder of Blockstream. How's it going, Adam?
Pretty good. Always lots to talk about in the Bitcoin tech space.
And we have Wiz joining us again. One of the project leads at bisq and mempool.space. And also happens to be a Liquid Federation member. So today's topics of Liquid, bisq, and Bitcoin privacy are going to be particularly suited to him. What's up, Wiz? Welcome back.
It's always a pleasure, Matt. Thanks for having me.
Happy Bitcoin Tuesday, guys. It's been a long week. I'm excited to be here.
It's Wednesday here, but
Good morning, Wiz. I appreciate you waking up at 4 a.m. for us.
it's cool, Matt. Anytime. Only for you and Adam, though. Nobody else.
Yeah, I was just saying I'll be more likely to be going to bed at 4 a.m. than getting up at 4 a.m. So
Like a true cypherpunk.
Yeah.
So guys, I mean, I figured the best place to start is Liquid. I mean, I don't think there's enough open discussion about the Liquid network. I think it's an interesting tool available to Bitcoiners. I think one of the things that people tend to, I think they tend to miss with these types of discussions is that we have many tools available to us. They all have different trade-offs, and they aren't necessarily mutually exclusive. You can use many tools or you can use none of the tools. You get to choose what you want. That's what's cool about Bitcoin to me. So with all that said, Adam, do you want to give our audience, a quick explanation of why they should care that the Liquid network exists?
Yeah, it's a different layer 2, and it was born actually, I guess, a year before I set about trying to form Blockstream. I got interested in Bitcoin. I went a rabbit hole like everybody. And my background was electronic cash, privacy, enhancing technologies, and kind of applied crypto. And so I thought one area that Bitcoin could be improved was privacy and fungibility. So I spent like a few months trying to figure out the most space-efficient way to do confidential transactions. Well, what it wasn't called that at that time, but what became known as confidential transactions. So it's a way to encrypt the amounts in Bitcoin transactions. You don't really know how much money I'm transacting, kind of private matter.
I think we might have lost Adam there. Wiz, can you hear me?
You're just fine, Matt.
Okay, so while we have, we're doing this live, while we have Adam, I just reset real quick. We'll proceed to Wiz. Wiz, you are a Liquid Federation member. It's kind of odd if you look at the Liquid Federation members. There's a lot of exchanges and large companies, and then there's just Wiz there. Do you want to tell the freaks, how that happened, why that happened, and what that means to you?
Yeah, that's probably a good place to start. I think it all kind of started with the so-called block size debate, right? At some point, there was this realization that Bitcoin fees would go up and kind of pump forever. And so if you're going to have a small base layer blockchain, then you need a number of layer 2 blockchains or side chains or off-chain solutions like Lightning, Liquid, etc. And so I was very interested in the Elements Core sidechain project and the technology that Blockstream had developed. They published like a really cool, actually several white papers on the Blockstream website about side chains and about the Liquid one more recently. And like Adam was saying about the confidential transactions and other base layer privacy features they have, which I thought were really cool. Hey, Adam.
I think I dropped her.
Yeah, welcome back. I was just saying I got really interested in Liquid, and I think I tweeted at Adam actually one day. I said, Adam, why wouldn't a bunch of cypherpunks, like individual cypherpunks, kind of fork the Elements project and make our own Liquid instance for the community, right?
Yep. Yeah, and actually, There's a Telegram group, right, where a bunch of people were discussing
Right.
how they might do that. So I was like, wow, this is really cool. I joined the discussion and made a suggestion, which was to do something first, which is sort of less work, and then move on to running a full network, which is to operate a second peg. So in Liquid, the blocks are signed by block signers, and then there's also a peg manager, which is operated by the same HSMs. And those keys are the same in today's Liquid network, but they don't have to be. So you could actually introduce a second peg that was operated by completely different people. And so it struck me that it would be easier to, set up some HSMs or software operated by different people around the world with, some kind of 2 out of 3 or 11 out of 15 or some suitable size, and have a cypherpunks Bitcoin like a CBTC, 7LBTC. So I think that'd be pretty cool to get there.
Yeah, I remember we had discussed that very early on, and at some point, I remember we were talking, and you said, "Well, why don't wouldn't it make more sense to collaborate? At least in the beginning, or until we figure out what we want to do." And I remember you had kind of invited me to join the Federation and kind of collaborate. So I'm glad that. I'm glad to be a member of the Federation. It feels really cool to even be now part of the oversight board, to be able to, kind of talk to all of these large companies and, oversee them, so to speak, on behalf of like the bisq community or the Bitcoin community. And it's pretty cool. It's also going back to like what I was saying when you dropped out was the small or the so-called block size debate. Bitcoiners obviously have seen very low fees up until very, very recently, the past few months. And so there wasn't a really obvious need for layer 2, right? Even Lightning was pretty much dead the past couple of years, but we all know it's coming, right? Matt said the other day on the show, Bitcoin fees are designed to pump forever, which is a very
That one triggered a lot of people.
Well, users want the best of all worlds, right? They want the perfect security of the Bitcoin blockchain. They want the perfect privacy. They want it all for free, right? They want low fees too. But that doesn't really work because you need to pay for miners, and obviously we're doing that by inflating the Bitcoin supply now. But as it transitions to directly users paying the miners with the transaction fee market, on-chain transactions are going to become very expensive, and this is something that people need to accept and people need to understand. And so this is where the trade-offs begin, right? I think Adam put this in a tweet a few months back. He said it's kind of like when the internet was starting and congestion control was getting added into the TCP layer, right? There was this huge debate. Well, we didn't need congestion control before, so of course the users want to have as much bandwidth as possible. They don't want to have like a fee market, so to speak. Right, Adam?
Yeah. I mean, I was trying to make an analogy that would resonate with people who are familiar with, routers and operating ISPs and kind of TCP. So knowing you run your own ISP, I guess that one was like something that paused to you. But I guess my point was that people were suddenly saying, well, Bitcoin transactions are always cleared for like 1 Satoshi byte in the past. Why is there this forced change? And really, it was just that like the internet was extremely unloaded, and so the flow control protocols never got a workout. No packets got dropped through to congestion, and suddenly you have the AOL effect and perpetual September and more users than it can cope with, and of course the flow control gets a workout, And then people get upset and like, why? Where is this flow control coming from? I don't like flow control. I was like, yeah, but I mean, what are you going to do? There's more demand than possible capacity. It has to degrade gracefully. I mean, I think I might say something more controversial actually about main chain block space stepping away from Liquid and Lightning. I saw there's some questions about why Liquid instead of Lightning, so maybe we'll come back to it in a sec. But I mean, I think even just about Bitcoin alone, the main chain, and Matt's comment, fees are going to pump forever. I think that, to me at least, Bitcoin is about bearer, like empowering end users with bearer hard eCash that can't be seized and you can spend. And so it doesn't have to be cups of coffee, but I think if the demand for block space got extremely high because there's lots of traders, that's one problem, or institutions or whales, such that the fees got to be consistently, I don't know, $1,000 a transaction or something, I would become a moderate big blocker, I think, at that point, because I think that would have priced out the differentiated use case. By that I mean the use case that banks can't compete with, right? So if you crowd out the main use case, that's a problem. So one of the thoughts with Liquid actually was that if you've got traders, and I understand not everybody's a trader, right? A lot of people just cold store, and I think that's a winning strategy as far as it goes. But the traders are just moving Bitcoins and other assets between exchanges. So they're going from like Bitfinex custody to I don't know, bisq or some other exchange, and is one custodian to another. So the fact that they send out on the Bitcoin chain is essentially spam, right? Because if they had another way to transfer from custody of exchange A to custody of exchange B, Bitcoin chain doesn't need to see that, and they don't even get any benefit from themselves. And also the people that are trading like that, they are completely fee insensitive. So I think it's generally accepted that most of the fee escalation is related to impatient traders. And the reason they don't care is, maybe the average transaction size is $10,000 or $50,000, something like that. And they're going to be paying, 0.1 to 0.2% fees for their trade. So, whether they have to pay 10 cents or $1 for a transaction, they really don't care. So they'll just look at what's the fee, and then they'll double it and send it, right? Just to be sure they're in the next block.
So,
and yeah.
Adam, let me jump in here real quick because I feel like we're getting into the weeds a little bit without giving a good overview. First comes first. Tell me if this is a decent TLDR, quick summary of what Liquid is. Liquid is essentially a multi-sig of partners that are running this network, and you can move Bitcoin into that multi-sig to then transact on this side chain. That is called a peg in, or you can move Bitcoin off of that, and that is called a peg out. And the peg in is a permissionless system where anyone can peg in at will into this multi-sig side chain. And then the peg out requires the Federation members to allow that to happen. Would you agree on that summary?
Yeah, I mean, there's actually so a few things there. That's correct. And for people's expectations, because when Liquid was first announced, some of the wording was about exchanges and traders. So people assumed, oh, you'd have to be an exchange to transact on it or something. But actually, the exchanges don't generally transact. It's just users, right?
And just to jump in, so and I missed a point. The reason a user would do that is because in return they get low fees, quick confirmations, and confidential transactions, which is what you talked about earlier, where the amounts are blinded. So when you look on chain, if you look at a Liquid Explorer as opposed to a Bitcoin Block Explorer, it won't show you the amounts that are being sent between people. It will still show you the addresses. It'll look like a Bitcoin address, but it's a Liquid address. but it doesn't show you the amounts. And in regards to tokens, it won't show you what token is being traded either. So that's why a user would consider switching into Liquid. Now, you mentioned something about traders. I think we should just really talk about this in passing because I really feel like it kind of has hurt Liquid adoption so far in terms of my audience, because it has, as you said, it made people think like, oh, well, I'm not a trader, so I shouldn't care about it. In terms of traders, what you mentioned is that they're willing to pay higher fees, and that is because on chain, what the scarce resource that is being traded is that block space. So you are being charged based on the amount of data you are sending, not the amount you are sending. So all else equal, a user that's sending a $10 transaction and a user that is sending a $2 million transaction, if they're paying the same fee rate, they're going to end up paying the same absolute fee, but obviously the person who is sending the larger amount is going to be paying significantly less percentage-wise than the person paying the lower amount. Now, when you add Lightning into the mix, Lightning fees are based on the amount you send. Liquid, I guess, is probably more similar to on-chain Bitcoin in terms of what that fee market should look like. But it just hasn't been tested yet, right? There's just not that much volume there. So right now, it just acts as a very, very cheap transaction chain. Would you agree on that assessment?
I think I'm going to switch networks briefly because I heard what you said, but it was breaking up on and off.
Okay, no problem. We'll be here when you come back. Consider a Chromium-based browser. And incognito mode or whatever, so all your extensions are disabled. Wiz, what did you think about my explanation?
Okay. I was using Firefox. Let's try that.
Yeah, I guess that's pretty decent explanation. It is really complex and very, very technical, very deep. Understanding of cryptography is required to really learn about all these things. And I'm not an expert on this at all. I'm more of a server guy, network engineer. I grew up in the data center, so I'm good at running Bitcoin nodes, basically. And the cool thing about Liquid for me is that it's an actual blockchain, and it's optimized for, like Adam said, or like exchanges, right? So obviously, I guess we'll get into bisq later on, but Lightning is really cool, in my opinion, for, if you go to this restaurant all the time or a cafe or a bar, and you open a channel to them, you can do lots of coffee transactions, with your trade channel to the bar. And at any time you can, publish that channel state to the network and settle it on chain. So it's a really cool way of essentially batching many, many transactions into a single on-chain transaction. And Liquid is kind of that too, right? It's taking lots of transactions that are between the members of the federation and also of the other users of the side chain, and kind of batching them all into a very few amount of Bitcoin on-chain transactions. So they both kind of make the usage of the Bitcoin base layer blockchain more efficient. So, Adam, are you back now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, back. So right. I think Matt was pointing at the peg in versus peg out asymmetry.
No, I went farther than that.
Okay.
But I think I said everything. I think you would agree with me. I tried to give a high level summary of the fee structure between Liquid, Lightning, and on-chain, and why someone would want to use Liquid, and why you mentioned traders to begin with, and why they pay significantly less fees in terms of percentage because they send larger amounts.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you want to go into the kind of security model for?
Yes. So I want you to
coins.
Yeah. So basically, we started off this dispatch with, Bitcoiners have many tools available to us. They all have different trade offs. Every time a new tool gets added to a Bitcoin user's arsenal, that makes me happy. This is one of the reasons why I started Dispatch. This is one of the reasons why I've been doing Tales from the Crypt for over, almost 3 years now. Is because these tools are awesome that we have the ability to use them, but not everyone needs to use them, and not all of them are suited for everybody. So in the case of Liquid, I think a good place to go here is, what are the trade-offs to Liquid? What are the concerns? What should people weigh in their heads when they're deciding whether or not they're going to use Liquid versus on-chain versus Lightning?
Right. I mean, I think that, from a user perspective, it's another trade-off, and so it's not as unseizable or as unfreezable, because there remains a possibility that this federation of businesses could shut down, and then you'd have to get your funds out of it. But it has extended functionality like confidential transactions and other assets like stablecoins, Tether and so on. And it's cheaper and faster for the moment, though that depends on usage, right? If usage grows a lot, it could end up with the same fee situation as Bitcoin. And the capacity is similar to Bitcoin in terms of transactions per hour or something. So it's, maybe 1.5 or 2 times as many. That might grow a bit when we improve the crypto efficiency with bulletproofs, but still it's not hugely different to Bitcoin. And but I think one interesting comparison here is, if you look at the old electronic cash system by David Chaum in the 90s, it had the property of extremely strong privacy. So like zero cash, Zcash, but even better in principle. But it's completely centralized. And so because of the really strong privacy, there was no way at all for them to do any selective censorship. They couldn't tell anything. The company operating the bank with a double spend database just literally couldn't correlate anything. And so there was no real censorship risk, because there's no information left to figure out what to censor, but it was a risk they could shut the whole system down. And so it had that property. And Bitcoin has a property that, there's some kind of pseudonymity-based privacy, but the amounts are visible, the UTXO history is visible, and you can kind of piece together some information from that. But it's very decentralized. So, even if you find something that a given country wants to block or something, it's pretty hard to do because there are miners everywhere and the miners are anonymous. So it's kind of different model. And I think Liquid lies in between the two. So that's my assertion, that Liquid is, in some ways a bit closer to the Chaum system because it has more crypto fungibility. The confidential transactions adds meaningful privacy, though not as good as the Chaum model. And it's a bit more centralized. It's still more decentralized than single server Chaum model. So it's somewhere in between those two models. And so, for general use, I think one interesting way to use it, and we've seen, organically more users doing this, is to put sort of moderate amounts into Liquid, like not cold storage savings, but, spending money, amount of money you're going to spend online in a month or something like that. And then you can transact cheaply, and then you can, take funds out and put them back in with a peg out or peg in. And that, the peg out and peg in is a little bit analogous to the Lightning open a channel, close a channel. With the
difference being, with Lightning, you can close a channel. Either party can close a channel
right
at will, right? But
yep.
but do you, is there too much? I mean, I think the goal, right, is ultimately some kind of atomic swap system for Liquid. So wouldn't
Yep.
that just alleviate the whole peg out thing? Like the peg out is more for like a settlement of like major, like the Federation or whatever.
Well, yeah. So what's I mean, there are lots of different ways to peg out. Many of them are countless, and some of them exchange based. And exchanges often have like two-tier sign-up processes where you can get through the first tier and do crypto only, and then you get through the second tier if you want wire transfers. So if you're doing like liquid Bitcoin to Bitcoin, you could make exchanges with just a
But
first
then we
tier.
have, but then we have a centralized custodian, probably going to
Oh,
have
yeah.
to have KYC. So just unpack this here. The fear is
Yeah.
right. The fear is you have funds on liquid.
Yeah.
You have them as liquid Bitcoin. Hopefully, you don't have too much, but you have. Well, let's say you have whatever funds you have as liquid Bitcoin, and then the Federation gets, they get compelled to freeze the network, or their funds get seized. The multi-sig gets seized, and this is why multi-jurisdictional is involved, and you have all these different companies to try and reduce that risk. But that is the
Right.
fear, right? The fear is that happens and you can't get back out, that you lose your Bitcoin.
Right.
It's the same idea as like a custodial risk, but obviously, significantly better than just trusting a single custodian, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think one thing that, so I mean, there's a couple of points. So one is that there are multiple ways to go between liquid and Bitcoin to get out. One is to atomic swap with another user, and there is a tool to do that. So that would be just two users that happen to want to go in the opposite direction. And, as with join market and things like that, sometimes user services just spring up where people, market make,
Right.
and they don't mind going backwards and forwards, taking a small fee. They speed it up for somebody else. They give them privacy. So there's that. And then there are three services that are kind of accountless, like no sign up. So one is Sideshift, another is Flip, another is Liquidity, and they like websites or Telegram bots, things like that. And you basically put two addresses in, you pay a small fee, and they swap it. And
It's like old school Shapeshift. It's like
yeah, pretty much, yeah.
momentarily custodial with no account, and they just do. There's a third party that does the swap for you.
Right, and then the new one, which just appeared out of nowhere in the last few weeks that people have been talking about, is this SideSwap wallet. And that has integrated some of these things into a smartphone app, which is kind of a curious, but it's a very nice simplifies your interface in a way, which is it's technically only a liquid wallet. The other wallets that Blockstream made, the Aqua wallet and the Green wallet, are both liquid and Bitcoin wallets, but SideSwap is technically only a liquid wallet. However, you can interoperate with Bitcoin via peg in and peg out. So there's a tab for that. And so if you want to pay somebody on Bitcoin, you peg out. If you want to receive some money from a Bitcoin wallet, you do a peg in. And so that's your user interface. Now, both of the peg out and the peg in go via the service. So it has the same kind of behavior as the SideSwap, the liquidity, Sideshift, and so on. But they also are doing some atomic swaps. So in wallet, you can swap liquid Bitcoin for liquid Tether, or for euros, EURX, which they're the issue, which SideSwap, the company, is the issuer of, actually. So and some of those things are atomic, and they're evolving and improving it over time. So they just did a release, it looks like today, actually, where they added a peg out feature, which was missing in the previous version. And so there's a Telegram channel. It's called sideswap_IO on Telegram, and they're talking about their roadmap and stuff. So it seems like they've got a lot of trustless things planned, like user coordinate, because they're the kind of counterparty in all the swaps at the moment, but they're interested to support user swaps so that different users can come and coordinate on it in its way. So I think there is an opening there for them to do some more trustless peg in and peg out, where you atomically pay them and they pay you from there. You atomically pay them in liquid Bitcoin, and they give you Bitcoin on the main chain, but in atomic fashion, right?
Right. So the fear, right? The fear is that custodians block the exit, right? So there's two. The way I look at it is there's two ultimate solutions here, or mitigations. Maybe solutions is the wrong word. It's too absolute. Two mitigations, and that's either user-driven peg outs, the ability for a user to basically execute a peg out on their own without the federation easily being able to stop them, which seems pretty complicated to me. And I don't know if you want to go into that. Alternatively, some kind of atomic swap market that is distributed rather than centralized, something like a join market type of situation where it's coordinated loosely between the actual users themselves. I guess a bigger thing would be using bisq, but that's more heavy. That's more heavy. Like I'm envisioning some kind of lightweight marketplace app that allows you to be on both sides. Would you agree?
Well, I think that bisq is one way. HODL has some liquid Bitcoin / Bitcoin swaps and trades and loans and things, so you might be able to do it on HODL as well, and that's evolving over time. But even with the SideSwap app, if they get the as they improve it, if they get the atomic swap out, even though it's a centralized company that's doing it, you don't really have to trust them, because you either get your main chain Bitcoins or you keep your liquid Bitcoins, right? So your remaining, so you don't have that transitory risk that the centralized service provider
like SideShift has.
Didn't complete. Yeah, they could take your coins and not pay you, and like, oh man, now you'd have to argue about it online. You may or may not get your money back. Where the other kind of binary risk is the whole federation shuts down for some reason. So that one, that's a side effect of the current architecture, but the transitory risks I think are fixable because of this kind of atomic cross-chain swap, and that could be. It sounds like, looking at what SideSwap are saying, that they are interested to allow users to put offers, like some kind of bulletin board. So it's not really an order book in the sense that there's a custodian, but an offer, like you can offer to swap for a fee, and I guess they'll match or let you search it or something. So they're developing that. But that would also be, I presume, that would have to be atomic, right? Because users could otherwise exit scam each other, right? So that kind of thing's possible, and that is a kind of mixture of a coordinator role, which is the wallet backend, and users placing offers. So I think it's kind of an app wrapper around something bisq-like for a subset of use cases. So about you mentioned another thing there, which was, so I should explain actually why the peg out asymmetry is there. So it's actually not to do with policy, but security, which is if you the block signers, so there are all these different exchanges and people involved, like Wiz is one of the participants in the network. So a subset of them are operating servers, with firewalls and stuff, and also an HSM inside. So the keys to do the peg and a block sign are in the HSM, and the HSM is running a lot less code, so it's easier to control, remote hacking risk for the HSM. It's going to be very hard to get keys out of that. But the server itself, obviously it's locked down as far as you can, but it's still internet exposed server. So in theory, if somebody could hack 2/3 of the host computers, the internet servers, and then override their instructions to just tell the HSM to peg it out to this user address, the liquid kind of peg wallet would basically become a warm wallet of some kind, right? Because you've got internet exposed hosts. Yes, the keys are on HSM, but if the internet exposed host's operating system and code was compromised, it could just tell the HSM to do things, and the HSM wouldn't understand enough to prevent it. And so when we were designing this in 2014 or so, Greg Maxwell hit on the idea of improving the security by having the peg outs be only go to offline hardware wallets of Liquid members. And in that way, if somebody would compromise, succeed in compromising all these servers and override the HSMs, they have to provide a proof to the HSM. The HSM can verify by itself that the payout is going to go to an address controlled by one of these hardware wallets belonging to the members. It's technically a zero-knowledge proof, so you don't really know which one, and just proves that the address was derived from one of these XPubs. And so that's the concept, right? That if it becomes much less attractive to hack it, because all you do is you pay the Bitcoins to a Liquid member, and that Liquid member could, peg out legitimately, so it's not so interesting to them. And there's a bit of a trust assumption that they're less likely to just try and take the money because people know who they are.
So the trade-off chosen was slightly more trust in the federation, at the benefit being less risk of complete loss of the system, right, from an external actor or something.
Yeah, it kind of makes it colder in a way. So it means that in one way of thinking, the peg funds are cold. Like you can move them around inside the network logically, user to user. But if somebody wants to take them out, they actually go to a cold wallet. And then what typically happens is one of the service providers like SideShift or SideSwap, Bitfinex, one of these exchanges. There are some people that are like prop traders, so companies that do trading. So those guys, they are actually going to give you the funds that you requested to pay out from their own like hot wallet, cold wallet, and then they're going to fetch it out of the peg out wallet later when they run out of funds. So that means they absorb the risk basically. So
an advantage of being a federation member is that you're able to to do that process yourself to your own cold storage. So enlighten me here. From reading the website, my understanding is there's a significant amount of federation members, but at any given time, only 16 are active. Is that correct?
That's a side effect of the current implementations. So the current federation is 11 out of 15, and that was kind of hard-coded in the first version. And we're in the process of rolling out an upgrade that switches to dynamic federations that can support larger numbers and people leaving and joining. So I should clarify as well that Blockstream is a technology provider. We are not able to do auto upgrades. The Liquid boards will, look at, let's say, the release notes and see if they like an upgrade, and they have to actually, depending on what kind of upgrade it is, they have to physically be in front of and push buttons on the hardware box. So it's not like remote upgradable over the internet for security reasons, and they have to actually interact with it. And we can't upgrade it, and that's by design. So that will become more dynamic over time. So but at the moment it's an 11 of 15, and if you look around on the Block Explorer, you can find the peg wallet, and it stands out because it's an 11 of 15 signature. And another interesting topic is there's a CSV, so a time block, and a 2 of 3 as well, which we can explain what that's about.
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of people have questions about that because of, I guess, there's an aging thing, and then it went back to the 2 of 3, which represents a security risk. But before I get to that, just real quick, it's 11 of 15. So, like, Wiz is not a part of that 11 of 15, right?
Yeah. So the problem is that the original version of Liquid was hard coded to 11 of 15, And there were 15 members at launch. This is a few years ago, right? But now there's like over 50, and some people are, happy to use the network services of another member, and you can peg out without having an HSM. So you don't need to be. There's a kind of list of you just submit like a hardware wallet XPub.
Okay.
Some people submit two, right? Because they got two different applications or.
So
things
Wiz's
like that.
XPub is approved. He's got an approved XPub, but he's not running an HSM yet.
Right. And so there are people that may never want to run HSM because they're cloud oriented or they don't have a machine room. And a lot of people do. And so but at the moment, the other problem is it's not that dynamic. And actually changing the federation membership is, tricky. You've got to think about the game theory because, if somebody was to attack the system from the inside, and they voted somebody off, they could do that iteratively until they controlled it, right? So there's a bunch of, it requires more than 2/3 to do a change, and it's for that kind of reason. So there's a bunch of logic about how the federation can evolve, and it can't be too quickly either because the coins in the peg have to change, because the keys have changed over time, right? So it's not trivial, but the end result is you've got, I think the other way to think about it is, even though it's built in a different way, it's a kind of blockchain assembled out of, instead of miners, HSMs. The HSMs can change, which moves it, with DynaFed, it moves it a bit less from a kind of fixed group of businesses towards something that's dynamic and evolves. And that's
so how does that look?
How do you mean?
how does like the DynaFed look in practice?
Because
this is the future goal, right?
Sorry. Yeah, it's. I mean, we made a release recently of the Elements D, which is the full node for Liquids, and power users can run one, and you run Bitcoin node and an Elements node, and they talk to each other, and that can verify everything about the chain, the peg-ins, and the Liquid transactions, and so on. So the most recent release of that is Dynamic Federation's ready, but the next release and the next release are needed to actually get it active. So it's not active yet, but that's something that's happening, I'd say, in the next quarter or so. And of course, it's subject to the Liquid members liking the feature set and upgrading to it, right? And once they have that, there's likely to be some changes because there's new participants in the network since a couple of years ago, like SideSwap, for example, or Liquidity. There are lots of people who are quite active in building products and services like Vulpin. They've got Liquid Taxi, Marina browser, plugin wallet. So there are lots of active development and service companies that would have liked to run a functionary but couldn't because of the lack of dynamic change in the network. So that will enable that change to happen.
So, but how does they like will rotate? Is that what happens? Is like they rotate randomly?
No. So today with 11 of 15, there's a kind of there's a consensus protocol, and the block is proposed in turn in a round robin, so in a circle, each proposes, and then blocks have to be signed by 2/3 of them. Actually, all of them that are online try to sign. And with dynamic federations, it's not rapidly changing. It's just if somebody goes out of business, then you probably want to remove them because maybe they sell their equipment, right? If they go bankrupt, or you get somebody new that wants to join that's starting a new application, like SideSwap, for example. Nobody heard about them until very recently, and they're doing a lot of stuff. So they joined the Liquid, right, and maybe they would want to run a functionary, let's say. So then that would basically be up to the Liquid Federation to discuss amongst themselves to add them, and then mechanically to add them, to call some APIs on the Liquid hardware servers to add this new block signer. and that would, it's not, it's something that has to be done relatively slowly because the peg keys have to, they go from, let's say 11 of 15 to 12 of 16 or something to keep the threshold. And so, and if somebody left at the same time, you've got to move the coins off the old multisig onto the new multisig. So you can't turn over keys too quickly, or the redundancy for control of the ability to roll the coins forward in the peg wallet could get degraded.
So, okay, so that makes sense to me. We had so first of all, we have Freaks in the chat. By the way, Freaks, the way I consider Dispatch, I think it's hosted by the audience. I'm just the moderator, and that is one of the reasons why the format of the show is the way it is. So I appreciate you all throwing comments into the live chat here, whether that's through Twitter, Twitch, or YouTube. I do personally think Twitch is the best for that. But I appreciate you all. We have a bunch of freaks in here basically saying that Liquid is centralized. I want to just make it very clear to the freaks that this is an obvious trade-off decision. It is not, Liquid was never meant and will never be meant to replace regular the Bitcoin network. It never was meant to replace the Bitcoin network. It is making a clear centralization trade-off. It is being more centralized for lower fees, quicker transactions, and the ability to adapt at a quicker pace than Bitcoin can. Like that is literally the trade-off that the sidechain has made. That is going to be more centralized. The question is if we can make a network that sits alongside Bitcoin that is not too centralized, where you have censorship, but is centralized enough that you have those benefits that come with it. So on that topic, we had this major concern. I mean, to be honest, I think it was a little bit blown out of proportion because as far as I'm concerned, Liquid is still in the beta phase, and it definitely was at the time. But we had this situation where I guess the Liquid funds in this multisig aged past 2015 blocks. I guess right before, like, that's basically a difficulty adjustment amount of blocks. I imagine that's not a coincidence. And then it reverted back to this 2 of 3 emergency thing, where the 2 of 3 keys were held by Blockstream HSMs in geographically distributed locations. Should we talk about this concern and how it's been alleviated? It has been alleviated since then, I believe.
Yeah. So it was actually. So first of all, let's just talk about the 2 of 3 to explain why they're there, and then how the behavior diverged from what it should have been. So basically, the 2 of 3 is a sort of disaster recovery plan, and the keys are actually not, they're in very cold storage. They're not loaded in anything. They've never been used. They're there for a kind of very, hopefully very unlikely eventuality, which is enough hardware breaks and enough, physically fails and enough Liquid members fumble or fail at backup, and you lose one too many keys to recover the funds, and that could potentially be because there's like hundreds of millions of dollars in it already. So, and that could become $1 billion or 10 billion, depending on usage and market cap and what people use it for. So the defensive kind of Bitcoin thinking was, well, it would be kind of irresponsible to have no disaster recovery plan just in case the unexpected actually happens, right? And there are certainly Bitcoiners around who really wish they had a better backup plan, who would have a lot more Bitcoins today if they had, a second backup kind of thing. So, clearly it would be very easy to remove this 2 of 3, and there's like, a few lines of code, delete that one, then it's 11 of 15, then there's no backup plan, and there's no, Blockstream could do something. So, but I think it's the right thing to keep the backup plan. So then, the other thing is, obviously, we actively don't want the ability to touch the funds. So it's not just a 2 of 3, it's a 2 of 3 with a time lock. So it's kind of dead man switch, right? So what's supposed to happen is that the 2 of 3 would only ever become active if the network stops processing transactions for about a month. Like it literally ceased to process blocks, which were a third of the node. And so that if that target was met, that blocks are still being produced, the keys in the coins in the wallet should keep getting pushed forward into the future. Would get kind of spent forwards, or pegged in or pegged out, and it would just keep getting pushed forwards. And that's how it's designed. That's what it's supposed to do. So, and that's kind of a neat feature, because it means that we have Blockstream has the 2 of 3 backup keys, geo-distributed cold storage, but they're not hot unless, they have no power until the network stops for a protracted period of time, which normally it's signing once a minute, right? So that's a pretty extreme kind of downtime situation. But now where it came unstuck, or it ran into problems, is that we had this kind of confluence of bugs basically, and so there is a target time window where it tries to roll transactions forward if they haven't been otherwise spent by a peg out. And it was supposed to be 4 weeks, but there was a where the HSM code had 2 weeks and the host had 4 weeks. So there was a mismatch. And so it left the window where it's trying to roll them forward shorter than it should have been. And then there was another bug that was kind of related. And we were aware of the bug after some time, and started trying to fix it. But then things got kind of crazy with COVID, and a number of functionary members were kind of in lockdown, so they couldn't. And because of the security features, that you have to be physically upgrades on, particularly on the HSM. It made it difficult to quickly, to fix this. But there was a period where there was something like 870 coins that were
right,
about 40 minutes, and that was the worst point. But so we found a more creative way to fix it, basically by upgrading a subset, and that was enough. I mean, it's all fixed properly over time, but there was an immediate kind of 4-node upgrade, I think.
So the fix is extending the lock time.
Well, yeah, to set it should have been, which is 4 weeks on both the HM and the host, and so it starts to roll forward. I think it's 2 weeks before expiry. So if they're less than 2 weeks, so if they're more than 2 weeks until expiry, it just leaves them sitting there because they may get organically used for a peg out.
So,
yeah.
My question is I guess the fear is Blockstream in a position to force that situation to go into a 2 of 3?
No, that's not.
Members allowed to block it, able to block it is basically my question. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I think that other than this bug, we have no remote upgrades. They have the source code for everything, and so long as they keep transacting, the keys could be posted on the internet and nothing would happen effectively, right? Because they'd be powerless. I mean, that would be a good thing to do, because if the network ever did stop for a couple of weeks, that would be risky. But just to illustrate, they should, by design, have no power unless the network stops for at least. So that's the trade-off, and I even though that has its risks, I think the risk of funds loss is sufficiently high. It's good to have this kind of backup situation.
So to be clear, a plurality of Federation members can stop this from going to the 2 of 3. Period.
Yeah,
right?
it's basically as long as the network continues to process blocks, it shouldn't happen.
Okay, awesome. Can you tell us anything about the HSMs or?
So, I mean, not that much really. I mean, we're working on a second version. We've deployed a couple of the new version ones, which have more kind of tamper detection circuits and things like that than the first one. I mean, the first one has some kind of key zeroing tamper stuff as well, but the new one has more. It's a kind of more powerful, more modern HSM that we designed. And what we're thinking to do actually is when we get the DynaFed deployed is to open a lot of it. So open the source for the HSM and sell the HSMs for people who are interested to operate liquid light networks or to operate different pegs into it. So at the moment there's one peg which is operated by the same set of servers as the block signer, but in principle there could be other pegs operated independently, and you could choose which peg you like the independence and commitments, privacy, and so on of. I saw one question in the chat scroll about a minute ago, which I thought was quite interesting and related to this, which is the question was, has there ever been a case where the Federation has blocked a peg out? And so the answer is no, that won't happen, because technically the peg out is only going to the hardware wallets of the Federation members, right? And so if you would go to the sideswap wallet and post your Bitcoin address, and then they would pay that from the coins they have in their own wallet. And if they run out of coins in their own wallet, they'll have you wait until the peg out happens, and then they'll give you the coins that are pegged out. So as far as I know, it hasn't happened, but technically the direct peg out is to this kind of offline hardware wallets, right? So you mentioned something else there, Matt, which was we have a plan, like a roadmap, a new design to have direct user peg outs. And so I think it was Andrew Polstra who thought of this idea. So recall the original offline hardware wallet design was Greg Maxwell's way to improve the security. So more recently, Andrew Polstra, who's head of research at Blockstream, hit on the idea that you could allow a direct user peg out and still have sort of similar security effect by making it slower. So lots of people can run full nodes. So if there was ever a peg out that didn't correspond to, if coins left the wallet that didn't correspond to a matching peg out, lots of people would notice and complain. And so if you made a process where there was an API for a threshold of the HSMs to retroactively block a peg out in progress, the default is most likely that will never happen, and they'll just go out, but they'll be delayed by 100 blocks or something that will give humans time to react if something goes wrong. And that would achieve a sort of similar effect without news pass through the hands of a middleman, of somebody who's going to give you their own coins and then fetch them out of the wallet.
I mean,
so that was the idea.
Basically, well, first of all, we have freaks in the chat asking what an HSM is, which means that the majority of the freaks coming in through the audio feeds are also confused. That means hardware security module, basically a physical device that is encoded to a certain set of rules. For a Bitcoiner, the way you could think of it is like a purpose-built hardware wallet that's always connected to the internet. And is signing based on a specific set of rules to reduce the risk of any kind of hot wallet attack. So Adam, I mean, what you're basically saying is, and I mean, this makes a lot of sense to me, and this is why I keep rattling the atomic swaps drum. Is basically the easiest way to mitigate the risk of not being able to exit liquid Bitcoin, exit the liquid network, is competition, is having a lot of different, people, organizations offering the ability to swap out. Hopefully, technical improvements in terms of like kind of distributed, decentralized atomic swaps. But also on top of all of that, I mean, I think the fact that confidential transactions exist on Liquid, and you can't see the amounts, adds another layer that makes censorship more difficult, just because transactions are more private on the network. On that note, I'm kind of curious. I think the confidential transactions aspect is really cool on Liquid, and it's kind of, I know it's a hot button issue. It's something that I kind of want to see on chain Bitcoin as well. But we have it on Liquid right now, and I can play around with it on Liquid. Is there a specific reason why? So confidential transactions is blinds the amounts.
Right.
It blinds the amounts, and then there's we're calling it confidential assets, I think, is what you're calling the fact that it blinds the tokens, correct?
Right.
And so if you're sending Tether or if you're sending 100 sats, you can't tell which is happening. Or it could be like a spaceship in Samsung's video game, like an NFT in Samsung's video game, or 100 sats or Tether, and you wouldn't tell what it is, and they can all be coin joined together. Is there a reason why stealth addresses haven't been added to Liquid because stealth addresses is this idea where, I mean, the show is a perfect example with Dispatch. If I could post a stealth address, and then people could donate, and they don't completely dox the amounts and who's donating. Is there a reason why stealth addresses aren't on Liquid yet?
It would be compatible. I think that, I mean, I was pretty interested in stealth addresses and trying to find ways to make them more efficient. I think the downside of stealth addresses is the recipient basically has to try to decrypt every stealth transaction that goes on the blockchain, period, right? So it's like CPU heavy for the recipient. And so it's a little tricky to do it on a smartphone, for example, right? So you have to download all transactions. I mean, if every transaction is a stealth transaction, which would be ideal, you'd have to download them all. You'd have to be a full node. You'd have to like try and decrypt them all. So that's the kind of downside. And there was some trade-offs as well. People were like, oh, well, I will make sure that mine like start with this number and I'll only try to decrypt a tenth of it or something, but then you've got less privacy. So yeah, it's the overhead is the issue.
So I mean,
this
is a particular use case that I've been focused on pretty heavily because I've been trying to I've been independently trying to help like activists and stuff accept Bitcoin privately. And like the dream, right, is that they can post like a text string and they can just receive Bitcoin in a private way, right? And it kind of, I mean, Adam, you're a legend here. I am just a mere mortal. I just use these things. It seems like Monero has figured out a way to do this stealth address where they can just post a string of letters and numbers, and they can just receive donations in a relatively private way. Can't Liquid be that as well? Like, can't Liquid have that stealth address function? Like, what am I missing something here?
No, I mean there are lots of things which would be possible with wallet support. So Liquid is very Bitcoin-like, but with extensions for confidential transactions and things like that. And so, how the wallet presents that to users, some of the features are like wallet only. They don't need network changes, right? And so I think stealth addresses are like that. It doesn't need any network. It doesn't need like a soft fork or anything. You can just do it. It usually sends some extra data in an op true or something. But so I think it's a trade-off you could do in a wallet, and it just has a cost. Now you need a full node, or you need to semi-trust a server to scan them for you, but at least the whole network can't see it. And yeah, I mean, I think if that could be made more lightweight, or people would just deal with it, right? Run full nodes and live with this cost, that ideally stealth addresses would be the default type of address. Because if you think about it, it's very convenient that you can have an address that you can safely reuse. Like having to keep changing addresses is very confusing to new users. So it's kind of ideal solution. And I tried for a while to see if I could find a way to, accelerate the crypto or find a different way to do it, but I didn't find any way to do it. So we're stuck with this kind of, heavy CPU stuff. And actually, about the, Monero things, it actually adopted, a bunch of stuff that we did at Blockstream or that I proposed before Blockstream. So I proposed a way to shrink their original linkable ring signature by 50%, and they went off and hard forked it in. So I was like, wow, okay, they actually do R&D and deploy it. That's cool. And then more recently, they added confidential transactions to the ring sig, and there's another variant of the way that Monero does things, which is more scalable, actually. So at the same time I proposed confidential transactions, I proposed a kind of way to send other people dust. So if you think about it, you could do this in Liquid, it just would require client support. So, which is if the wallet just grabs other addresses and sends people 1 sat or 0 sats or something.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And the wallets accept that and just ingest it and use it. It doesn't have the forever growing UTXO set side effect that the linkable ring signature does, but it has basically the same kind of privacy side effect. And so I thought that was pretty cool. And I'd actually proposed that at the same time as confidential transactions, but yeah, there's more ideas and people have implemented.
So, Adam, you brought it up. Look, I'm very privacy focused. The freaks here know this. The audience here knows this. Is to me, I think the whole idea of focusing Liquid on traders, I literally could give two shits. I do not care what the traders use. I understand like it has knock-on effects for the regular users in terms of them not using our chain space, which is fantastic. But confidential transactions really fucking cool to me. So it like, do you agree that there's I think there's like an area for Liquid to excel in terms of increasing P2P, person-to-person transactional privacy in an easy, accessible way. Like you said, like little things like self-shuffling on with confidential transactions actually can improve your privacy. Self-shuffling on Bitcoin on chain, you just look like an idiot and you're just spending a shit ton of money like an idiot, right?
Yeah, actually, that was one of the things that Greg Maxwell got excited about confidential transactions when he realized, because Greg was the original proposer of coin joins some years before, I don't know, like 2011 or 12 or something. And so when he realized that confidential transactions work very well with coin joins and actually make any join a perfect coin join, because you don't know anything about the amounts, which is usually what creates the problem for coin joins. And he thought that was pretty, more exciting and got enthusiastic to put that together, sort of thing. So it'd certainly be possible to, run, port one of the CoinJoin wallets to Liquid, for example. It's very similar, and it would be much more effective because, all these debates between Samurai and Wasabi about, change management and value matching and stuff like that. I think a lot of those things are simplified because you can basically join anything to anything. It doesn't even have to be the same asset type in Liquid, but
exactly. It could be an NFT, it could be Tether. It doesn't fucking matter.
Right. Yeah. So that's cool. And right. Let's see. Backtracking a bit because we got off on a lot of topics there. So we talked about the disaster recovery key. That was why that's there, how it got fixed. Oh yeah, so something else I was going to say is that the fact that Liquid is federated is actually, just a side effect. So the original sidechain white paper proposed a soft fork to Bitcoin that we actually implemented. Matt Corello did that, in the early days when he was still at Blockstream. And that would be a kind of fully peer-to-peer sidechain. So there'd be a soft fork to Bitcoin. It's similar in concept to drive chains as another method. And so then the soft fork in Bitcoin would have, just enough awareness of small proofs from the sidechain to verify that these peg-ins are, from the sidechain into the main chain are authorized, and then you don't need any HSMs or signers. It's like, miners are effectively processing that without any keys. And so I think it would, be very nice to get back, to get that next. So we just did, the federated model because there were more technical challenges, and you want to, start somewhere and improve from it, right? So we did the federated one first. We're about to do the dynamic version, and we're thinking about how to do the next one. So I saw Sergio from Rootstock has another new idea, and then there's a drive chain thing that Paul Stortz has been working on. So, it takes it's an adventurous and complicated soft fork to make to Bitcoin, right, to support sidechains, but I think it's a very useful soft fork because it allows more decentralized opt-in features for Bitcoin. So yeah, the side effects of the federation are felt because we really want to get to the fully peer-to-peer. The other thing that kind of complicated the fully peer-to-peer version is you're effectively trusting miners, sort of, more so than with direct Bitcoin, because with direct Bitcoin, everybody's running a full node and they can verify all the blocks. So if one miner goes crazy, you can ignore them, right? And it doesn't matter that much. But with a sidechain, you're sort of, the majority of the hash rate, basically, if it was dishonest, could steal from the sidechain wallet, the sidechain peg wallet. So that's the trade-off with sidechains. And you can't really, make a soft fork rule to verify the sidechain blocks, because if you do that, it's not a sidechain anymore. It's an extension block, and people don't like that for a good reason. They would say that,
Adam, do you think we'll ever see confidential transactions on main chain?
I hope so. It'd be certainly a much more interesting debate to have than a block size debate from a few years ago. And I'm thinking it might be, a different set of people arguing on different sides, right?
I think so too.
Because I mean, I also suggested to people when they were having the block size debate that it would be a logical thing to do to increase the block size a bit, like 4 times or something, and put in confidential transactions at the same time, with the same kind of argument I was making about, Liquid being a trade-off in between the very private Chorm server and the Bitcoin pseudonymity-based model, which is that, what are the side effects of a bigger block? Well, it's more expensive to verify. There's increased risk of, miner centralization. And what's the concern of miner centralization? Well, it's selective censorship. So if you've got more privacy, that kind of counteracts some of that centralization, censorship risk. So I would say, you can't really measure it exactly, but I'd say there's a reasonable argument to be made that, the more fungible it is, more private it is, the bigger a block you can handle without that creating a bad side effects.
Because the miners don't know what to censor, basically.
Yeah, and you get a bit of that in Liquid, but only a kind of light version of it. I mean, confidential transactions are not a silver bullet, right? Because you still have the transaction graph. It's just you really can't tell what's change and what's payment, and what type is what. So it gets lost pretty quickly.
It's easy to break the heuristics.
Yeah, much easier.
Yeah. Wiz, you've been quiet there for a while. You still live?
I'm here, and I've been listening to Adam. Yes. I had a lot of thoughts about the federated model because I know we'll get to bisq later, but bisq is also a federated model, and I think this is kind of an underrated thing, or a lot of people are maybe afraid of it because they don't understand why you would make a federation in the first place. But the way I think about it is that every transaction has, like, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 properties. Um, so obviously security, privacy, censorship resistance, uh, the cost of the transaction, and the speed of the transaction, right? So I guess that's 5, and they all kind of trade off on each other, right? Obviously, we all know on the Bitcoin main chain, if you use a higher fee, then you'll get a higher speed, and likewise, if you want some additional functionality, if you want to be able to trade, then maybe you need more opcodes in your transaction when you approach like smart contract functionality. So the size of the transaction gets larger, and so therefore your fees will also be larger. And so all of these security, privacy, functionality, censorship resistance, speed, and cost are all affecting each other. And if you change on any one of the variables, then the entire equation kind of changes. So, of course, users want everything. Users want everything. They want the security of the Bitcoin main chain. They want base layer privacy. They want censorship resistance. They want the transaction confirmed right away, and they want it all for free or low fees. But unfortunately, this is the downside of digital scarcity. There's only 21 million bitcoins. That's what gives Bitcoin its value. But at the same time, the same digital scarcity means that the space in Bitcoin's blockchain is scarce, and so that will also increase in value. The actual bytes, as you said, Bitcoin fees are designed to pump forever, and so it hasn't been super relevant to worry about Bitcoin on-chain fees for a long time until recently, and now just a couple weeks ago, we saw fees. I think they were over 300 Sats per VByte, and so a typical on-chain transaction was approaching, I think, like $25-$30. And if you extrapolate this out and you realize, okay, maybe not this cycle, maybe 5 years from now or 10 years from now, yeah, a Bitcoin transaction could cost several $100s or even more. And so, how do you address this? Well, there's the federated model is one way to kind of balance the equation of security and privacy and speed and cost and functionality. So, obviously, with Liquid, you're trading off some of the security. You don't have the Bitcoin base layer security that blockchain provides. Maybe you lose a little bit of censorship resistance. Maybe, I mean, the privacy gives you censorship resistance, so it's in a different way. If you use Liquid, then you actually gain privacy because of the confidential transactions, and the fees are lower, right? So you're kind of trading that security to gain privacy, to gain cheaper fees, and also speed with the 1-minute block times. And so every federated model or side chain, or even other altcoin chains, they all are making trade-offs, right? Like, there's no free lunch where you get everything for free anymore. The time of zero fee transactions and even low fee transactions is probably gone. So this is why we use federations. And with bisq, for example, bisq is also a type of a federated model where people want to trade. And obviously, Bitcoin's base layer does not support random people trading with each other. And so one really funny thing, I think, is that people are really afraid of Liquid. A lot of bisq users are really afraid of Liquid because it's a federated security model. But they seem to forget that bisq is also a type of federated security model. If there's any type of trade dispute, so a long time ago, bisq originally started out with a 2 of 3 multi-sig model, and we talked about this on your other show, Tales from the Crypt, I think about almost 2 years ago. The 2 of 3 security model is extremely insecure because say say Adam and Matt are going to trade some Bitcoin for some USD, and Wiz is the arbitrator. So these are the three key holders of our 2 of 3 multisig. Well, that's great if all the three people are actually separate people. But when you're dealing with anonymous people on a marketplace with like bisq, if I'm the arbitrator, I can just go to the bisq market and take all of the offers, and now I control 2 of the 3 keys, and I can steal all of the funds, and there's nothing that you can do about it. So bisq realized this a long time ago, that the 2 of 3 security model with anonymous parties is not secure. And so bisq changed to a similar time lock trade protocol. So as Adam explained, Liquid has this really cool 11 of 15 multisig with a time lock that will degrade to a 2 of 3 multisig after a set amount of time. I think it was 4 weeks, he said. Well, bisq trades, if 2 people want to trade with each other on bisq, sometimes one person, it's also called like an option trade. Say you take an offer to buy Bitcoin on bisq, but then as soon as you take the offer, the price tanks by 20%. Well, maybe you change your mind and you don't want to make that payments now. So in other words, you want to default on the trade. Even though your security deposit was, say it was 15%, well, the price went down by 20%. So it actually makes sense for you to just abandon this trade. Well, your security deposit and the seller's funds are locked in this 2 of 2 multisig. And if the other guy just disappears, that would lock those funds forever. So the bisq trade protocol also has a time lock where it's 2 of 2. I think it's 10 days for, I think it's 20 days is the hard time limit for a fiat to Bitcoin trade. After 20 days, it degrades to a single sig where it just gets donated to bisq, basically, right? So you're totally trusting the bisq Federation in the case of someone walking away. So for the most part, the bisq trades, the 2 trade counterparties are financially incentivized to complete the trade together just between themselves. But if there is a problem, then you essentially have to trust the bisq Federation with that trade capital and the security deposits, that they're going to mediate and examine any evidence. Did the guy make the payment or not? And then do a refund of the trade capital to the correct person. And so the bisq federated model has its own governance structure. It's not a company. It's a DAO, right? It's a decentralized autonomous organization, and there's only realistically like 15 or 20 people, who are the pseudonymous bisq contributors that have the voting rights to, participate in this DAO. Of course, anybody can, but it's mostly the contributors of bisq. And the more contributions you do, the more voting rights you get. And so, I have a few percent voting power in the bisq DAO, and maybe the OG founders have a little bit more. It depends on how much you contributed. And from the DAO, you can have proposals. You can make decisions without a company, and everyone's in a different jurisdiction. Some people are totally pseudonymous. So that's how the bisq Federation kind of achieves this multi-jurisdictional censorship resistance. No one country's government would be able to easily shut down the bisq DAO. And from that, we can actually have some federated seed nodes, for example, right? So in the bisq Federation, I think there are 4 seed node operators, right? It's me, MZ, Devin, and Miker, I think, are the 4 guys. And we also have some other semi-trusted, in this federated security model services like the price feed. If you put an offer on bisq, the price changes once per minute to the bisq price index, which is our, again, federated kind of price oracle service for what the price of Bitcoin is. So if you say, I want to create a bisq offer that's 10% premium on the market, every 1 minute, your bisq node will connect to either me or the other price server operators' price services, get the price of Bitcoin that we say is the price, based on the open source software we're running, and your bisq node will adjust the price. Obviously, if one of the price server operators was malicious, they could say the price of Bitcoin is $1. Everyone would lower their offers to $1, and you could buy some really cheap Bitcoin, right? So there's a lot of trust in the bisq federation, in this DAO organization. And Liquid also, when you use Liquid, you're trusting the federation and its governance structure and its functionaries to, do what they are entrusted to do. And that's why I just think it's so strange why bisq traders would feel comfortable with the bisq federation, but not the Liquid federation.
Yeah, I mean, sorry. I think another thing that is comparable maybe is people will, they'll use hosted wallets like, Cash App or Exchange Wallet and things like that, or I guess PayPal is a kind of hosted wallet. Some of these things you can buy Bitcoin, but you can't draw them. And so, some people will use that, but if they hear that Liquid is federated, they'll say, "Oh no, I can't use that," right? Or they'll use a single exchange custody, but they don't want to use a federated custody. So, I think it's counterintuitive, and Bitcoin is a benchmark, so everything new gets compared to Bitcoin, and then people want to be persuaded why it's better than Bitcoin. And of course, nothing is better than Bitcoin, because if there was a way to improve Bitcoin, it would have already done it, right? So any layer 2 is generally cutting some corners, making something worse in one way to get some benefit in another way. So I mean, using Lightning as an example, you get very cheap, very fast final transactions. And you say, well, why didn't Bitcoin do that? So, oh yeah, well, okay, let me tell you, right? You've got managed channels, you've got hot wallet risk, and so okay, people start to cool on the idea. But for the use sense, but you just can't move everything out of Bitcoin into Lightning. And of course, Lightning need to settle into and do arbitration between channel close disputes or what have you. So, and I think you see this similar, if maybe with a lot of altcoins. Compare, how decentralized really are many altcoins. Like look at maybe Binance Smart Chain or Ethereum or EOS, and there are dozens of them, and I'm not familiar with how all they work. I mean, I guess XRP is another one. So many of these things are actually, when you get down to it, fed for stake, or one party owns like 70% of the coins, and it's proof of stake, or one party, controls the list of I don't know what they're called in XRP, like UNLs or something. So I think you could make a reasonable case that Liquid is more decentralized than many of these things. It's just that, Bitcoin doesn't have a marketing department. So, and it doesn't have a coin to sell either, right? So it's like, it's Bitcoin. You opt into this layer if the trade-offs make sense to you, but there's nobody with, a big marketing budget to advertise it, over advertise and exaggerate its decentralization or benefits or something, right? So I think Liquid tends to fall into the same bucket as that, and like various companies and individuals contributing to tools and code into it and around it, but there's nobody really. There's no native coin, there's no ICO, there's no, so it's just Bitcoin layer 2 stuff, and that has a side effect of much less colorful marketing and more kind of focusing on technical. It's kind of more engineer-led thinking or something, right? Where there's not really much advertisement.
So I mean, basically,
go ahead.
I mean, basically, the argument is we see in the so-called cryptocurrency world, basically these chains, these projects that have decided to go more centralized, they're almost doomed to be superseded by someone who decides to go even more centralized. And we had Ethereum.
Oh, absolutely.
Ethereum went more centralized than us. So then Binance and CZ went to BSC, which is the same exact Binance Smart Chain, which is the same exact APIs and calls, contract calls as Ethereum, but it's even more centralized, so the fees are cheaper. In the case of something like Liquid, though, it's a way to try and channel that move to a more centralized model while still maintaining the Bitcoin unit of account and allowing Bitcoin users to actually flex and use that. It's more complementary than a competing centralized chain. It's a complementary centralized chain. It's a side chain, right? Which is the term that has been used frequently.
Yeah. Something else that people are often not aware of is that because there was I think it was a question in the chat quite a while ago about Liquid versus Lightning, and so people will tend to think about it as like it's a choice or there's some positive competition between Bitcoin and Liquid and Lightning. Like, if Lightning wins, that's good because it sucks transactions off Bitcoin and makes Bitcoin transactions cheaper and faster and creates more value for those users. But what they don't realize is that actually Lightning is a kind of caching layer, and while it works on top of Bitcoin, it also works on top of Liquid, confusingly. So the C Lightning implementation, there were originally 3 main implementations of Lightning. I think there might be 4 or 5 now, but the C Lightning, which is by Rusty Russell, who's an ex-Linux kernel developer that works for Blockstream, and Christian Decker and Lisa Nugget are our 3 developers working on that. And that implementation, which is called C Lightning, it works on Bitcoin, but it also works on Liquid. And so you can establish a Liquid Bitcoin Lightning channel by funding it with Liquid Bitcoin. And of course, the fees are cheap and the channel setup is fast. And the channel close is fast and cheap. And closing channels, when escalated compared to when you opened it, can be problematic. Like that's a pain point sometimes for
it's a major pain point.
Yeah. So I think it's an interesting trade-off potentially, because people are typically not putting huge amounts of money into Liquid. Sorry, into Lightning. So maybe you could accept
we kind of are
reduced. Well, yeah, some people are getting.
So Adam, tell me, am I crazy here? So future Bitcoiner has so one of the things I think Liquid could be useful for is we have a bunch of outputs. We care about privacy. I don't want to consolidate them because I'm going to link all of them together. But fees are rising, right? And I'm worried about fees increasing. Is there a scenario where a user does an atomic swap from my chain UTXO? I'm worried about this UTXO. I want to consolidate it, but I don't want to link it to my other UTXOs. I do an atomic swap into Liquid. I open a Liquid Lightning channel, and then in Liquid Lightning, I do an atomic swap into Bitcoin Lightning. Is that a reasonable scenario? Is that something that we could see in the future, or am I just being crazy?
Well, I think, yeah, you can do that. And some people have, it does look like some people are interested to sort of accumulate. I saw somebody in the Sideswap channel saying they were doing this. They would buy Liquid Bitcoin in small amounts and store them in a Liquid wallet. And then, that was like their daily stack or their weekly stack. And after they built it up a bit more, they take it out to the main chain and cold store it. And they felt that cheaper partial custody, and they take it to real cold custody when they got enough to make it worth paying the main chain fees. So that's cool.
That's obvious. That's going to happen. That it makes sense to me that the stacker, and this is my audience, right, is the guy who's doing he's doing his daily stack of $10, $15. He does that into Liquid, and then he comes back on chain, because if he tries to do that on Lightning, self-custodial, he has to deal with inbound liquidity and stuff. It becomes a major pain point. But he could do it on Liquid easily.
Right. Yeah, and Liquid is, I guess, has some simplicity advantages in user experience because you don't have to manage channels. You can receive money when you're offline. You can store the coins in a hardware wallet, things like that. So it feels a lot more familiar to Bitcoin. Not quite as cheap or fast as Lightning, but that's a trade-off. And of course, you get confidentiality too, but Lightning has, onion routing and privacy in a different way. So, but then what you were saying about Lightning on Liquid connecting with Lightning on Bitcoin, that's like, it should be possible to have a Lightning route where hops in the Lightning route are different. First hop is Bitcoin, the next hop is Liquid Lightning, the next hop is main chain Lightning, and you get paid in Bitcoin or in Liquid, and it gets sort of converted along the way because there are lots of places where you can basically do one for one, paying only network fees for Liquid Bitcoin versus Bitcoin. So it's not like, if you were to do that where one hop was Tether on Liquid, and you could certainly make a Liquid channel that's funded with Liquid Tether or something, which is curious. But if you do that, then the Lightning node needs to be like a trading bot or something to hedge it, right? Because it doesn't really want to sell Bitcoin. So if the channel's all Bitcoin, but some of the hops are Liquid Bitcoin and some of them are main chain Bitcoin, you could have a mixed Liquid and Lightning network with channels that go through it. I think that could be interesting. And maybe, if people are using Lightning for lower values than they use the main chain, maybe the trade-off of Lightning on top of Liquid makes sense, right? Because if they're putting $100 into it, maybe they're happy putting that into Liquid, and then the Lightning channel will be, it'll feel nicer, right? It'll be cheaper to set up. It'll be cheaper to shut down.
100%.
Yeah.
I love this. I feel like we're brainstorming live. I mean, I was I was just on. Shout out to our boy Chaz. I was on his show, LN Junkies, Lightning Junkies. Obviously, they're a little bit biased towards Lightning over there. The biggest cost to using Lightning is when you have to hit the chain, right? When you open. Yep. If you're a new user, you're trying to onboard new users, and fees are crazy, and Bitcoin's trading at $200,000 a coin. Then like they have to hit the chain to open a channel at $50 a fucking transaction or something, right. $60 a transaction. If they could do that through Liquid, that's a major advantage.
Yeah. So somebody's asking a question, what about stable coins like USDC? Well, so there are some stable coins on Liquid. There is LCAD, which is Canadian dollars issued by Bull Bitcoin, which is a Canadian kind of stacking, auto stacking.
Great exchange.
Buying Bitcoin site. Yeah, they're really Bitcoin guys. And so they're the issuer of the LCAD, and it's a very fun stablecoin because it's not really a stablecoin, it's a voucher, and the only way to redeem it is to buy Bitcoin with it. So you can't like get your Canadian dollars back, you just have to convert it into Bitcoin. But it's stable in the price of Canadian dollars while you have it, and so people actually use it a little bit to kind of pay Canadian dollars around. And there's Tether is on Liquid, and Eurex, which is a euro, by the same people.
Which is run by SideSwap, right?
Yeah, exactly. And there are some more, like those are the big ones, but there's a Japanese stablecoin.
Adam, as far as I'm concerned, Sats are our stablecoin. On this show, we don't like to talk about the trusted third party so-called stablecoins. As far as I'm concerned, they call them stablecoins, but they only go down. And they call Bitcoin not a stablecoin. They call Sats not a stablecoin, but it only goes up. So as far as I'm concerned, I would prefer the stablecoin that only goes up. But all that said, so Liquid, if we go into Liquid into Lightning, this makes a lot of sense to me. This idea of using Liquid as a way to onboard onto Lightning if you're a lower value user, Am I correct in thinking that it's easier to do atomic swaps once we have them on Lightning, whether that's liquid Lightning or on-chain Lightning, like regular Lightning?
Well, I mean, there's wallet work needed in either case. So it looks like SideSwap can do main chain swaps, and I guess they're going to get more trustless over time. Liquid for Bitcoin, and there is Lightning on Liquid. Groobles has some channels and stuff. It's not a very big network, and it needs to be integrated into more wallets. So it's using the kind of C Lightning, which is a command, like Linux command line kind of Lightning space. So, but it should be fairly easy for somebody who can. I mean, many of the Lightning wallets are open source, right? And Lightning on Liquid is plus or minus the same as Lightning on Bitcoin. So for somebody with the right skill set, they could basically fork a main chain Lightning wallet and make a Liquid Lightning wallet with it. And then there's another interesting thing, which we were discussing there, which is, well, why not go further and make a combined Lightning network that can route between the two? So that would be a cool thing, but it's a project for somebody to do. I think, it should work, but there's a little bit of development work in there.
Wiz, what are you thinking over here?
Well, okay, so yeah, there's a lot of topics to kind of touch on, right? I mean, okay. Another thing about the, I guess well, okay, so one of the first points made was Liquid was originally created for exchanges, but then they kind of opened up the full node software to everyone. So any user can now use LBTC and issue assets or do any really confidential transactions, which is really cool. But especially for the use case of bisq, or even like before we even get into that, like there's this I don't know, there's like this meme on Twitter I saw, like someone said like, oh, Liquid is a shitcoin, and I thought that was funny. Liquid is not even a coin. Liquid is just a blockchain. I guess they were referring to like LBTC, but this was said by someone who has coins on like Kraken or some centralized exchange. And if you don't understand it's kind of like this progression of so a lot of people say like, I want something to be trustless, right? But if you think about it, there's actually really no such thing as like trustlessness. All you really ever do is spread the trust around to more people and add more checks or slow it down with more time locks. But you can never like eliminate trust. So for example, if you walk up to a vending machine and you put a coin in the vending machine, you're trusting the machine that it's going to actually dispense the drink and not just steal your money. And likewise, when you sit down at a restaurant and order some food, the restaurant is trusting you that you're going to pay the bill at the end of the meal. And if there is a dispute, they would call the police or take you to court or something. And there's some kind of dispute resolution process in all this. And the way you typically solve this problem in the real world, in the fiat world, is by introducing a trusted third party. So, for example, if I go to the restaurant and I have an American Express credit card, I don't trust the restaurant, and the restaurant doesn't trust me. But we both trust the bank to guarantee the transaction and to sell everything. And of course, the bank takes their cut. So now when you extend that into the crypto space, even on the Bitcoin blockchain, you have miners, right? Like everyone knows the risk of a 51% attack. If you're always trusting that the majority of hash power will not just mine empty blocks, and they'll actually mine your transactions and everyone's transactions into the blocks. And this works.
Wait.
What?
Wait, there's two different things, right? There's a 51% attack, and there's the chance of miners not mining your blocks and not mining your transactions,
Censorship.
right? But if you raise your fees, we can have a censorship situation without a 51% attack, and we can have a censorship position with a 51% attack, but it's a different scenario.
Right. So the risk of censorship resistance is kind of the combat to that is the financial incentives, right? So by
Right.
putting transaction fees on your transaction, you're saying you're putting like a bribe or a bounty on your transaction. If anybody mines this, they can get the fee, and that's why miners will prefer to mine blocks full of transactions instead of
Right.
empty transactions. There's also the like inherent incentive that if the miners just mined empty blocks, they would kind of destroy the value of the token and the network, which is something they would have had to invest in by building their mining hash power facilities and hardware. So there's a lot of incentives which make the miners always want to mine full blocks as much as possible. And if you start with that point, and you say, okay, I'm going to trust literally any miner out there with hash power. I don't care who it is, but I will, you're trusting the majority. You're trusting the collective community of miners to be honest and do your transaction into a block. And then if you kind of trade off that a little bit and you say, okay, maybe I don't need to trust, thousands of people. Maybe I only need to trust like hundreds of people or thousands of anonymous people. Maybe I only need to trust like 100 reputable people or something, right? Like I know that if I give my Bitcoin to, Mark Karpeles, he can gox me. But if I spread that trust around to 15, 20, 100 people, and they're all checking each other, it's much, much less likely that you do this. So there's a lot of gray, like not gray area, but like this is like this spectrum of sliding scale where you start with a single centralized trusted third party, you move up to a multi-sig model, or from beyond that you move up to a federated model. From above that you move up to like a decentralized model, and then at the very top would be a fully distributed like Bitcoin mining base layer level of security. And so obviously Bitcoin is optimized for maximum security, but it's extremely expensive to pay all of those miners to, Adam knows this even better than I do. I mean, to build a mining facility is like, all right, start by buying some land, building a
Right.
building, high voltage power lines, high voltage transformers. I mean, you're essentially building a data center just without any redundancy. So, you could easily spend millions of dollars in your facility. And so the Bitcoin security is the most expensive, but it's probably the most secure system that humans have ever figured out how to build. And so if you don't need that level of security, if you just want to stack $100, maybe you don't need this Bitcoin base layer amount of security. Maybe you're fine with just trusting 20 reputable friends or companies or whatever, right? And so this is kind of why I think Liquid is cool, is because, especially with dynamic federations, you can just trade off. You can have that option, right? And if if you're going to do $1 million transaction, then of course you're going to use a Bitcoin base layer. But if you're going to do like a medium sized transaction, maybe you want to use something like Liquid. If you're going to do a $5 transaction at the cafe for a coffee, maybe a Lightning channel is best. And it's always about using the right tool for the job. So when you talk about Liquid as a technology, I believe it's like the best middle balanced trade-off, where you trade off a little bit of security for a ton of additional privacy and new use cases and lower fees and faster confirmation times. It makes sense for a lot of use cases, not all use cases. Like you said, a lot of people will always prefer, when you talk about cold storage, yeah, you're not going to use Liquid as your to store your entire life savings. It's kind of like a hot wallet in a way, or maybe a warm wallet. Maybe there's no terminology for this yet, but if you keep like 95% of your money in offline multi-sig cold storage on the Bitcoin base layer, but you have like 5% of your money in a bank account in fiat currency or Lightning channels, or liquid, pegged
Or
into
like
liquid
US
is LBT.
dollars.
Exactly, like that makes sense to have that kind of the best tool for the job. Like when you go to the supermarket and you want to buy some food, you're not going to be doing a Bitcoin base layer transaction, right?
Yeah.
You're just
The overwhelming majority of people have their wealth stored in trusted options. So if in a hyper Bitcoinized world, we have trusted options on top of Bitcoin that are better than the current trusted options, because at least you have proof of reserves, at least you have certain guarantees. That's not the end of the world. Like this idea that like everything needs to be at the same level as Bitcoin on chain is just untenable. It's not a thing that's going to happen, and that's fine. These are things that give Bitcoin users more options, right?
Right.
Yeah, and it goes back to the block size debate. It was now you can get a Raspberry Pi and throw Umbra on there and run Bitcoin Core and even Elements Core and a dozen or so apps all on this very, very cheap computer, and you can fully verify everything. And if this goes back to the block size debate, if you make the blocks big for some reason to try and make the transaction fees less, then you probably can't run it on a Raspberry Pi anymore, and it leads to centralization, et cetera, et cetera. So there has to be a balance for everything, not just the Bitcoin block size itself, but for middle transactions and for coffee transactions. There's the right tool for the job for every type of transaction, and those are so far. I think we've only mostly talked about simple payment transactions. But if you want to talk about maybe the cooler features of Liquid, like simplicity, where you can actually do some smart contract functionality, or issuing some assets for some reason, like say I have a coffee shop and I'm going to issue coffee tokens. So if you have one of these Wiz coffee tokens, you can come to my coffee shop and redeem it for a coffee. That type of utility token. It's so cool to just be able to issue that on the Liquid side chain. It eliminates the need for so many shit coins out there that all they do is just issue tokens. And it's so nice to be able to have a Liquid side chain with Bitcoin as its native token, but also the ability to do more interesting use cases with different levels of privacy and speed and lower cost.
Yeah, actually, Grubel's made an interesting comment. It's like not Grubel's on Twitter about there's some debate about swapping into altcoins and like a justification for altcoins, privacy coins. And so he made the point that if you swap into an altcoin, you're now exposed to its price. And there is no peg, right? So you have to do a trade. So it's kind of like there's some analogy basically that there is no peg, but there's a market, right? So you have to find somewhere to trade it, and you're exposed to its price movement. And if the coin was centralized and it stopped allowing transactions or something, you'd have a kind of a different problem. Yeah, so I think that if Bitcoin gets too, I guess the point is people sometimes mistake technology limits for intent. So by intent, because we all like Bitcoin and the censorship resistance and bearer properties and so on, that we would like everybody to enjoy those benefits and be able to afford it for their use case, because people are, have different amounts of income and savings in different parts of the world. But then the technology has limits. So then it has to, basically price is the thing that distinguishes, right? So, but I think there might be a future where new technology arises that creates a different problem, like if there are very scalable snarks, so that the blockchain doesn't include all the transactions. It just includes, a few hundred kilobytes of snark proofs or something, and that proves anything. Proves that every transaction in the block was valid, and then the coins are just proofs that their transaction was in that block. Then maybe you have a chance to make it very scalable, and it'll be hard to get anybody to pay for fees because there's no limit.
So Adam, I'm curious, on that topic, where does the liquid fee market come into play? Because right now I can pay 0.1 sats per byte for a transaction, which is, by the way, makes me feel like a fucking baller that I can just pay that for a transaction and then it just gets confirmed right away. The way I look at it is the whole point that we have the transaction fees is because me, humble node runner, who's running a node through fucking Tor on a Raspberry Pi, needs to be protected so that I'm allowed to run it, which I completely respect on chain. But with Liquid, you have these federation members that are running high performance hardware connected to very high bandwidth connections. So what is the limit, right? Like if Liquid gets successful, does the block size increase on Liquid very easily? Why would there, what situation ends up where there's fees on Liquid that are high?
Yeah, I mean, I think the blockchains are hard to scale. So you could push it a bit further but I think you do want power users to be able to verify, to be able to absorb that, receive that much information over a reasonably fast consumer internet connection, and buy, a gaming PC or something that can keep up, sync a chain from scratch and then keep up with it in, like a week or something, right? And so that will start to pose a limit. If you go beyond that, I mean, it's just a database at that point, right? So you just will give up. I think the verifiability is important because, so I mean, another thing that is not so intuitive is that at least for the assets on Liquid, the people with the full nodes could fire the block signers and elect new ones amongst themselves and resume the chain from the last good state. So let's say the block signers started doing something that a bunch of users didn't like, or some of the businesses relying on it didn't like. They could take the chain and resume. Now, of course, they could take tethers and assets and things with them, but the bitcoins they'd have to peg out. And if the block signers refuse to give them their coins out, that's a different problem. But generally speaking, they can resume the chain. And so it's important for them to be able to run a full node to check that the blocks are valid. The blocks that the block signers are signing are valid and don't have double spends and so on. I think.
I guess the question I'm asking is, so for the pegged assets, for things like Tether or NFTs or whatever pegged asset you want to talk about, EuroX or whatever, LCAD, those things, it really doesn't matter what chain they're on because the centralization risk is happening at the issuer side. So they can move, if they're angry at the Liquid Federation, they can move to whatever fucking chain they want to move to. And we've already seen that happen. We've seen that happen with Tether. They went to Ethereum, then Ethereum fees went up, then they went to Tron. Now they're coming back to Liquid. They can go wherever they want because ultimately what you're doing, you're trusting Tether. You're trusting the people that are holding the USD. I mean, with all that said, the point is if we're talking about this idea of trust, how does a user level that? I don't understand exactly how a user realizes what they're going to do in terms of, like, do they trust on chain versus liquid? Does liquid, the key is with liquid, I'm trying to figure out, how does the federation, like why would you be a federation member if your fees aren't going to go up over time? How does, what, like, where does the game theory follow where the federation member wants to secure the network if their fees are just staying, at their basis point?
I mean, so today the fees don't actually go to the federation members; they go to Blockstream. But then Blockstream is using them to offset some of the Peg wallet transaction costs. And I think you need fees to avoid spam. And so the fees need to be in Bitcoin. They can't be in assets, because somebody could print, ridiculous number of assets and flood the chain using them as fees. So I think liquid Bitcoin is the right asset to use for fees. But nobody's really trying to make money from the fees directly, because they don't have mining costs to defray, right? So it's more like, despamming. The people being functionaries and block signers are, they're trying to run a business. They're like side swap that is charging swap fees. It's like 0.1% swap fees. Some of those swaps you can do yourself cheaper, but they're less convenient. Or exchanges. So they're getting kind of more use out of it. So they're willing to, or they're philosophically interested, right? So they're running a node, but the node isn't like a profit center. It's more the indirect benefit. So yeah, that's the fees. And one thing to say about the fees as well. So 0.1 sats per VByte, but they're confidential transactions, so they're a bit bigger. But still, it works out like less than one. I think a little less than 1 sat a byte, but that always works, kind of thing at the moment. So I think your general point, though, I agree with, which is it would be a reasonable thing to increase the block size a bit on Liquid if the fees, if it filled up and the fees started to get annoying. But I think you can't go kind of crazy, right? Because the CPU costs will get out of control, the bandwidth costs will get out of control, and if nobody can verify it, then it's not really a blockchain anymore. And you just.
But like, how does the federation members, like, why are they federation members? Like, what do they? I feel like they need to be making money off of it to be.
So they've all got right. I mean, they've all got some use case. So I mean, take SideSwap, right? They are they're making these commissions on the trades in the wallet, right? So they're sort of accelerating swaps and facilitating, Bitcoin to liquid Tether, or Bitcoin to liquid Bitcoin cross chain, and they're taking commissions on it. So that's how they make their money. And so I think the other part of it is, they want to be able to trust the network security, and one way to do that is to be part of it. So to operate, 1/15 of it or something,
right?
And look around at who else is doing that. So there are people that have hypothesized that in a very far future, where Bitcoin doesn't have any subsidy left and it's all fees, that one hope is that while the fees will provide enough money for the miners to make a profit, continue to operate and provide security to the network. But another theory could be that people who run Bitcoin related businesses maybe want to do a bit of mining just to keep the network secure and protect their Bitcoin related investment. So that's a theory I did some Bitcoin mining on. I was like, well, here's me complaining that Bitcoin mining is too centralized. It's Bitcoin, there's nobody to complain to. So I guess I better do some mining. So, figure out a percentage that I was comfortable with doing mining. And I put some money into mining. And that way I felt like, of course I didn't make a dent, like a tiny fraction of a percent, but I figured that it doesn't take that much. I think it's like, a few percent of Bitcoin's total market cap, completely decentralized Bitcoin hash rate. So I think something like that could apply. Kind of thinking is the more prevalent in Liquid because there is no mining, right? I mean, there's no reward as such. So it's already jump started to that situation, and they're not doing it for the fees. They're doing it for, well, because we need to run a business on it, and we need to be able to trust what's going on. So we're gonna do it. So it's kind of jump to that. I mean, sometimes layer twos and altcoins experience things that would only happen in the far future for Bitcoin. So it's kind of done one of those like this. And it seems to, there seems to be a queue of people that want to get functionaries. So as soon as Dynafed is ready, there are people that are, keen to operate one.
Yeah. So I mean, basically, there's incentives to be a Liquid Federation member. Those incentives aren't the fee. It isn't the fees. Like, you're not becoming a Federation member to make fees,
right?
And that's okay.
You could get into a kind of weird conflict too, right? If there were fees and no rewards, maybe some of the Federation members want the blocks to be as small as possible, so the fees are really high. Other ones like, no, our use case needs retail payments. You're killing the use case for us. You get into some conflict. So the way it is at the moment, nobody's really, they just want it to work reliably, support lots of use cases. And to act as, I guess, in a way, a kind of a sort of reduced, a trade-off that can support bigger blocks and more CPU to verify all these confidential transaction proofs that would be a problem on the main chain because it would be censorship risk. But for a side chain, it's opt-in, right? So people don't have to, they can tolerate it being more centralized because that's up to the people that opt into it.
Right.
And when you talk about like why become a member of the Liquid Federation and what are the incentives, I think it's funny. I actually saw something on Twitter that made me laugh. Someone said Wiz is part of like the Liquid cartel, so he's trying to hijack bisq and make it use Liquid or something hilarious. And they don't realize the reason I joined Liquid was to be able to represent like the interests of the bisq community, by participating in the governance on the board or just being able to like verify things, internally, or being able to, provide liquidity.
You can peg out at will, right?
Exactly. Like those are the incentives, right? Is to participate in the network as a member, not for any direct financial incentives, right? Obviously, I run a lot of stuff for bisq, and so I also want to be able to provide this, similar services or maybe bridge services between the Liquid and bisq communities. So that was the incentive for me. I don't know. It's kind of like, okay, on the internet also has governance. Not to like go off topic, but the internet being a peer-to-peer network does have a governance structure. And, I've even like tried to get elected to the executive council of the internet in Asia Pacific and, other like fun stuff. But just being a part of the internet, you kind of want to participate in the policies or the governance. You kind of want to have a say in how things work, and not only, and on the other side, you want to be part of the discussion, or you want to just have a say in things, how they're running. So I would say from a membership perspective, those are the incentives. Then of course, I think Matt, you would agree as well. Before you recommend your friends to use something, you also want to be intimately familiar with how it works and
100%.
verify it yourself. Yeah. So that was, before I suggested to bisq that we should consider adding, support for the Liquid chain, I wanted to like fully verify it myself and get comfortable with how it works. And that was cool. Like even when there was, that issue that Adam mentioned earlier with the time lock 2 weeks versus 4 weeks thing, I actually asked Adam, I was like, can you send me the source code for this thing? I kind of want to verify it. And sure enough, I was able to get all the source code and actually verify what was going on. And I thought that was really cool to be able to ask for that, right?
And to be clear here, like you're I appreciate the fuck out of you. I mean, you're hosting bitcointv.com, which hosts all of our archives for Citadel Dispatch. And we've had issues with people hosting that shit. I mean, like there's no clear financial incentive for you to do what you do. You're putting yourself in a more vulnerable situation, being a Liquid Federation member. I worked through all the different scenarios. Yes, I'm a little bit biased because Wiz is a friend, and he's been on Dispatch multiple times. But like honestly, like there's no way for him to make money here. Like if anything, he's losing money being a Federation member. You put it all together, that's how it comes out. I wanted to, Adam, while I have you, and I appreciate the fuck out of you. Like it's fantastic that you've been here for this conversation. I think this has been a really very important conversation for the audience. 6102, this has been famously called the 6102 Bitcoin show because he refuses to dox himself. He's only doxed himself once on Voice, and that was on the Stefan Livera podcast. But besides that, he's never actually doxed his voice. And he wants to know, and I'm very curious as well. So he did channel me in this question. Is it possible for us to do a multi-party transaction on Liquid without doxing the information, like doxing the amounts and the destination of the individual transactions to the other people of the party? Basically, the idea is it possible to do a coin join without unblinding your confidential transactions?
Yeah, you just need the blinding factors to add up between the inputs and the outputs. So I think you don't really need to know anything about the types or values of the other parties, just that you get out this amount that you put in, and you have to do some kind of, coordination game where partially signed messages are passed backwards and forwards. So there's, for people doing some kinds of Bitcoin stuff, you come across PSBT, which is a kind of file format for a partially signed Bitcoin transaction. So there's an extension to that called PSET, which is by actually Andrew Chow is the person who works on both of those, and he works at Blockstream. So he's been working on PSET, which is a way to, adds Liquid extensions to this kind of message format and adds blinding factors and things like that to it. So something like that should be possible. And yeah, I mean, the intuition is basically with the blinding stuff, in Bitcoin, the inputs, the values of the inputs have to add up to the value of the outputs plus the fees. And in Liquid, the value of the inputs of each type have to add up to the same value of the same type. And that, there could be multiple types in there, right? But the inputs have to add up to the outputs. And the way that happens with the blinding factors is the blinding factors have to sort of cancel out on each side. So it's mathematically possible to, join with something where you don't really know what it is or how much it is.
That's great. I mean, that's what we want to see.
Something else I was going to mention, because we were talking about sort of privacy and confidentiality, is that coincidentally, the confidential transactions is the building block used in a few different things, including Mimblewimble. So when Greg Maxwell used to be the CTO at Blockstream, but's now independent, he was implementing it. I mentioned to him that with this range proof, you wouldn't need a signature because the range proof itself is kind of proof of ownership. And that is, like a first step along the way to Mimblewimble. Mimblewimble was sprung on the world by another pseudonym, actually. But as a side, Liquid basically has the building blocks in it already to do Mimblewimble-like behavior, which is instead of doing a transaction with a signature and blinding factor, you just make an opt-true transaction. There's no signature, and knowing the blinding factors is what enables you to spend, and you have to know the blinding factors to spend, and then you need to do something, and you need to make a wallet that understands this kind of a different way to use the Liquid blockchain formats. So that's another thing that could be done potentially in wallets. And then the only thing missing for Liquid for Mimblewimble then would be that it's not making use of the mathematical properties that lets you delete the history out of Mimblewimble transactions. But it's kind of curious that you get the kind of claimed privacy benefits from them or something. It would actually be possible today even.
Yeah, that's a good point. There's a lot of I think we're just seeing the very beginning of what's going to be possible with this basically new global financial system. There's this very famous post by Hal Finney on the Bitcoin Talk forums where he's talking about the future of Bitcoin banks and Bitcoin banking. And I think Adam also tweeted about this in the past too, when HODL HODL implemented their decentralized lending platform on top of Liquid. And it's kind of like this is the future of Bitcoin banking is some kind of side chain with Liquid that, of course, settles on the base layer Bitcoin blockchain and uses Bitcoin as its token of account, as its unit of account. But the sidechain itself can do all kinds of really cool stuff that the Bitcoin base layer wouldn't be able to do. And this is also why I'm so interested in Liquid, right? Because we're just seeing the surface of what new opcodes or what new contract functionalities, and maybe this is a good time to talk about bisq a little bit. Like with we talked about the kind of coffee transactions or day-to-day transactions for daily stack, or large settlement transactions that batch a lot of things. That's like the obvious use case of a side chain or any of these things is, Bitcoin base layer fees are getting high, so let's batch a bunch of transactions on Liquid or Lightning to get the fees down, and then we'll settle on chain eventually at some point. But the real other side of the cool stuff you can do with a side chain like Liquid is the new functionality, right? And this is like where you can just imagine the future of like HODL HODL Lend is a cool example, right? If you're not familiar, they have this on chain in a Liquid contract. They'll lock up Bitcoin, or they'll do some kind of atomic swap. I'm not too familiar with the technical details, but your LBTC and your USDT are in this really cool multi-sig swap contract, right? So you can fully verify everything. And I think that's the real key to the future of Bitcoin banking, is that, back in the day, if you go back to the gold standard, you would have a bank vault. A bank has a vault with a bunch of gold bars in it. Well, how many gold bars do they have in the vault? Nobody can really verify that easily. But more importantly, how many gold certificates did they issue out, right? Are they a fractional reserve or is it a full reserve? Is it, I think they're, are they fully, do they have 100% reserves or not? And that's the really cool feature about Liquid that's underrated, is that if you imagine Liquid as some kind of bank that's issuing not gold certificates, but like Bitcoin certificates or Bitcoin IOUs, like what the LBTC token essentially is that you can fully verify not only the holdings of this Liquid federated bank, but also the liabilities. And I don't know of any other system where this is really possible, where you can fully verify both the assets and the liabilities of this type of sidechain. So that's really cool that you can do that with Bitcoin, or more accurately, on top of Bitcoin, to enable actual banking use cases like peer-to-peer lending, or bisq is another good example. Bisq on top of Liquid with more privacy and lower fees. That's where Liquid is really going to shine, and that's why I'm bullish on the future of Liquid for this functionality.
Yeah, I mean, the hodl hodl stuff is interesting. I don't know if you guys ever had them on, but they could explain it more. But I tried it out a little bit, and it's
We had them on.
Yeah,
They're
okay,
technically
so
a sponsor of the greater podcast, but not a sponsor of this show. We have no sponsors on this show.
cool. Yeah, I mean, it's just basically like a 2 of 3 trustless escrow, and it's quite a low risk way to collect interest on US dollars, because the person who borrows them has to over collateralize it with Bitcoin, and as the lender, you get one of the keys for the collateral. And so, unlike the other lending platforms where you basically give money to a middleman, you don't know what they do with it. If it's like lent out, what the risk is. You can actually see the coins cold, guaranteeing the loan. And so yeah, it seems to be, there's more people wanting to borrow than there's dollars to borrow. So any money that goes in there just gets used up immediately. So it seems to be pretty active. And actually, the main borrowing, they have Tether on a couple of Liquid is the one that gets most used on that one for some reason.
Yeah, I mean, they get a lot of shit. They actually get a lot of shit about supporting altcoin. Altcoin supported,
I see,
or
yeah,
alt
so
chain supported, like stable coins.
Yeah, so
What's interesting is they actually have a lot of trouble with the confidential transactions. It actually ruins their setup. It makes it way more difficult for them to use liquid USDT versus regular USDT.
Right, because if there's a dispute, because there's 2 of 3, if the lender or borrower gets in dispute, like you underpaid or you didn't pay as much as you said you did, they can't tell because it's confidential.
It's kind of great. I love that.
You have to. So we added a feature. I mean, we needed to add it anyway, but we kind of rushed it for them, which is in the Green wallet. You can click on it. It takes you to the Explorer, but it's still confidential. And we made a new feature for the Explorer, which is you click on it, and it sends the blinding key in a URL path as a comment field. So the web server doesn't see it, but there's JavaScript in the browser to decrypt it, and then you can see it. So you can share that with hodl hodl, and then they can see who's telling the truth, basically. But without that feature, they were kind of who do we believe here?
Well, I'm fine with that. That feature, not a bug. So
that's how bisq has to. I mean, I think bisq actually requested that feature first. Yeah. So if I'm the mediator on a trade dispute, and if you want to, the burden of proof is on the buyer. In this case, they need to prove to the mediator that they sent the LBTC to the certain address, and the only way to do that is exactly what you just said, by revealing the blinding key. That's why originally when we launched LBTC trading on bisq, we actually had to require the users to use like an Elements Core full node, because at the time the Green wallet didn't have that feature.
Yeah. Well, the Green wallet actually won't send to a non-confidential address either. It's kind of it really wants you to use. I mean, the network would support non-confidential addresses, and Elements can, which Elements is kind of like Bixby but for Liquid. But Green and Aqua are confidential only, basically. So yeah, but now that there's a URL on the Explorer that can decrypt it in JavaScript, so it's kind of nice. So
Adam, like one of the cool parts about Liquid, right, is that like all the API calls, everything is exactly the same for Bitcoin. Like if you already implement Bitcoin, it's super easy to implement Liquid, right?
Yeah, I mean, actually, Novak from Coldcard was talking about this the other day on one of the.
He's been on the show
guess.
many times.
But he was talking about. I guess he's talked about it in a couple of places. But anyway, basically, what you're saying that Liquid is very easy to do because all the API calls are the same. There's some small extensions to do the confidentiality, but once you've adapted for that, basically, here's your tool chain, your application stack. It all works and it's low friction. And so he was, the one thing you need is the crypto library for confidential transactions. So Bitcoin has the main library that it uses is libsecp, but there's all the crypto. And the same developers that work on libsecp added the confidential transactions implementation. So there's a libsecp version with ZKPs, so it has the confidential transaction range proofs and things. So he figures the main challenge is to get that running on a cold card, and he feels like the rest will be quite simple. So that'll be pretty cool if get Liquid supporting cold card as well.
Yeah, that's fucking awesome.
There is already a Liquid support in Ledger, like the Ledger hardware wallet as well, like NanoS, and of course Blockstream made the Jade as well to have confidential transaction support. And actually, it turns out that the hardware wallets have like rather small memories and slow CPUs. So Jade is significantly faster and more memory because it can do well. I mean, it has a QR code reader on it as well, which takes more resources because it has a camera and screen, and it has we knew that we would want to do confidential transactions on the processor as well. So it's got like a kind of dual core 32-bit RISC chip.
Yeah, Jade is really cool. I played with that a bit. I think probably the one thing that most Bitcoiners would want on their wish list if they were going to use Jade would be like an easier ability to self-host everything on like, for example, like if they have a Raspberry Pi at home, maybe Blockstream could make an app for the Umbrella App Store that's like the Jade, how do you call it? Pin, server-side pin backend. Is that what it was called?
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's kind of like pin server or something. So actually, I mean, we should explain what that is. Hey, most hardware wallets are, like inside it's protected by a pin, but particularly, I mean, none of them are that great mostly. But if somebody steals it and they've got a lab, there's a chance they could get your keys out of it and steal the coins. And so some of them have secure elements that are supposed to be hard to extract keys from. But it turns out most of them, there's two CPUs, there's a secure element and MCU, a kind of general purpose CPU. And what happens is when you power it up, you give the pin to the secure element and it gives the mnemonic and the keys to the application processor, and then it's all running in the application processor. So the distinction is not that great between the different models, whether it has a secure element or not. The application processor ends up doing the signature because secure elements don't have like DSA signing capabilities and stuff. So in any case, Jade is partly one of the thought processes we wanted to be like a fully open source hardware that you could buy off the shelf hardware and run it on it. So buy like an M5 stack type of variants. There's a variant like a Fire that you can download the firmware open source and flash it yourself, and now you have like a Jade functionality. And but then it's not going to have a secure element. So we figured, well, what can we do about this? And the thought was to use a challenge response protocol with a server so that if you get the pin wrong 3 times, then you can't decrypt what's on it. And so the mnemonic and keys are encrypted, and they're encrypted with a key that's kind of, split between the server and the client. So the server couldn't decrypt your stuff either, but you can't decrypt it without challenge response to the server. And if you fail 3 times, the server will say no. And then you can recover it. You just have to reset it and put your mnemonic in again. But it protects you against somebody attacking it, even though it doesn't have a secure element. But the question there is, so what Wiz was saying is, well, what if I run my own pin server and I don't want to rely on this, internet hosted pin server? And yeah, we released a source code for it, and it's pretty small. It's like a bit of Python code that answers this challenge response, counts down to 0, and then locks you out and deletes the keys or what have you. So it's pretty cool actually to put that on a Raspberry Pi and hide it somewhere, and you can connect to it over Tor. And then if somebody gets your hardware wallet, it's going to be pretty hard to override the pin lockout server if you can't find it. And that way you have one less dependency. So yeah, that's possible. I think we need another. We need it to have another firmware update for Jade to add the configuration option, but the server part is open source already to use it.
Yeah, right now I think you have to actually change the hard-coded pin server backend URL in the Jade firmware, and then reflag. Yeah.
Yeah, if you're building your own, you could do it because you've got the source and you can just change the URL. But we want to make it so that even with the stock pre-flashed Jade, that you'd be able to change it to your own server.
Because it's kind of similar. Like a lot of friends will ask me to be like their key buddy, right? So they'll say like, "Can you just hold on to one of my keys of my multi-sig setup?" Or Raspberry Pi. Can you just host my Raspberry Pi for me on your network or something like this? And I think that would be and it's a good service, right? Because I have plausible deniability. I don't know what they're doing. I'm just a hosting service. But that would be a cool kind of service to provide, is that kind of like a self-hosted Casa or something like this, where you have a multi-sig signing, and then you could define whatever rules. And I think with NVK's product, like the cold card or something, you could add you could add multiple devices in multiple jurisdictions to create your own cool multi-sig setup. So you could have one Raspberry Pi in one country with this hardware device, and then in a different country, and that way you're much more seizure resistant, right?
I mean, you could at least do it with cold cards in every jurisdiction that you want to put them in.
Right, but then you have to actually travel to those countries, right?
Yeah. But it's only him. He's the only one fucking going with this shit. But I love him for it,
I think it's cool.
No, it's very cool. I agree. Yeah, this is fantastic. So Adam, before we leave here, I want to talk about the Blockstream satellite.
Oh yeah.
I think it's a very cool thing you guys are working on. I think we should talk to the freaks, talk to the audience about how it does require trust, but it doesn't require as much trust as you would think. You want to talk about this a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So actually, it's a common question because, the satellites, I mean, people don't necessarily know the details about the outline of how satellites work, but they're basically there's not much intelligence in the satellite. So most intelligence is on the ground, on the uplink. And so we're running several physical uplink sites that we control. And I mean, a lot of people will rent space in a satellite uplink co-location or something, but we have our own uplink. And so it gives us a bit more independent control, but nobody's, interfering with our equipment. And we run a full nodes on those and encode the data in a way that gives redundancy for the satellite and upload it. And so then you get the client equipment. There are different types of equipment, most recent being the base station, which is a kind of power over Ethernet flat panel dish. So you pretty much connect it, mount it, point it at the satellite, and connect it with the Ethernet cable to your router. If you have a power over Ethernet capable router, if you don't have, you just plug in the power injector, and it relays basically lots of stuff about Bitcoin, real-time transactions, blocks as they're mined, and the full block history, actually, Lightning Gossip data updates, and the Bitcoin client source code as well, periodically. And all with a lot of redundancy and error correction, so that you can get a power cut for an hour and you still recover and all that kind of stuff. So then the question that arises is, well, wait a minute, now I'm trusting Blockstream for this data, and they could send me bad blocks or sensor transactions, and trusting one person is a bad idea. And so then what Matt was saying is that counterintuitively, it's actually not really trusting us very much, because the Bitcoin blockchain is kind of signed by miners in a way, all the proof of work on it. So for us as the node operator to modify anything, we would have to do a lot of mining, right? And so the data that comes out of the blocksat, you feed it into a Bitcoin node that is extended with this forward error correction decoding. Actually, the data that comes out of the blocksat is UDP, and then you feed those UDP forward error correction packets into Bitcoin that's been extended with fiber and optimized for satellite use, and it decodes it basically. And you get a full node. So the full node's verifying the proof of work and transaction validity. So we can't do very much. And the other thing you can do is verify it with very low bandwidth. So if you just get something to give you a recent, block hash from a recent block, and you can check it's in your blockchain, and everything is correct up to that point. And you could get someone to read you that over a phone call, or there is there's a phone number that Grubels has in his profile. I think it's like 1-800-BLK hash or something like that. And if you call that number, it reads you the most recent block hash, like a time service. You can go with that. So that's kind of idea, and a little bit analogous to being on a Bitcoin peer. If one of you have on average 8 peers, and if one of them was trying to feed you malicious or invalid data, you would discover it by the other ones. Oh yeah, so the number is 1-833-BLK hash. So if you call that, it will read you stuff about the most recent block hash. So if you're on a peer-to-peer network and you've got 8 neighbors, and one of them's very fast in feeding you most of the data, but you realize it's lying to you, you'll discover that because one of your low bandwidth neighbors will feed you a more work block that conflicts with it, and then you'll realize something's wrong and disconnect the fast node or ignore what it's saying. So that's the idea. So the blocksat is kind of like that, right? It's an extreme version of that, which is a very fast node sending you all the data, and then you have a very slow kind of almost human speed little checksum one. And some people use it, they're not fully offline. They just use it, you could use it on a multiple network. So you could have other peers, but just with very low bandwidth. So then you would automatically get that kind of cross-check. You just save on internet traffic. And I think the main, for a lot of people, another interesting thing about the blocksat is privacy, because it's receive only. Nobody knows your IP address. There's no Bitcoin, other Bitcoin node in the peer-to-peer address, so you've got very strong privacy, and it protects you, gives you service. Those can be, political or just accidents. The day before we released the base station version, there's a Canadian lost its internet connection because a beaver ate through the like a rodent ate through the fiber cable to the whole town. So stuff happens. Right?
It's lost internet.
Yeah.
I mean, that's fantastic. I think people underestimate how powerful it is that we have a satellite just literally broadcasting Bitcoin block data nonstop, 24/7.
Can you get Elon Musk to make like a competing, not competing, but a complementary service? So like you don't have to just trust the Blockstream satellite, but you can get like multiple satellite peers.
That would be cool. I mean, there is one. I mean, people often ask, will the block set become redundant after Starlink is, more widely deployed and available? And the answer actually is no, because Starlink is a routed network. It's kind of like, GSM or 4G data in the sky. So it's, there are uplink and then satellite laser links. And so it's not really broadcast. It's point to point, and the data is only available to subscribers. So they could selectively cut you off. You have to probably identify yourself to pay to sign up for it. And so the same data, if lots of people downloaded it, would like use a lot of data because it'd be redundant, like on the internet. Whereas a block set is just
Simplex.
broadcast. Yeah, and there's like 4 satellites and 5 transponders covering most of the globe, and so they just got massive coverage areas that are literally receiving the same data. And then there are some areas where there are two different satellites covering the same area, and then we send different forward error correction code of the same data. So if you receive both, you can buy like 2 dishes or two base stations, and then you'll get the block history twice as fast, and you'll get blocks in half the latency and stuff like that, because it can assemble. You can receive from either one and it works, but if you receive both of them, you just get the data faster. So it's kind of a neat trick of forward error correction codes.
Yeah, I'm kind of jealous I don't have my own satellites to also host such a service.
We don't either. They're like very expensive. We're leasing bandwidth on like commercial satellites that have satellite TV and other like industrial like data uses. So we have probably about an HD TV channel's worth of bandwidth, and we just optimizing custom compressor for Bitcoin transactions. So it's actually kind of cool. Like Peter Wool worked on design of it and implemented it, and you could actually on the Bitcoin network. It basically losslessly compresses Bitcoin transactions with just with a transaction context. So that saves a bit of space. So there's lots of optimizations that went into it, and yeah, so we can squeeze useful stuff out of 1.5 megabits of raw data, but it will fully sync a node from scratch, which is kind of surprising, right? You just plug this thing in and leave it there for a week or so, and you'll have a synced node from scratch.
What I kind of like about it is, I guess credit to the Blockstream marketing strategy, is this idea that if a government wanted to stop the Blockstream satellite, they'd have to take out TV. They'd have to take out other providers. If one thing it's not like just your satellite.
Yeah, if there's one thing that's going to upset people, it's going to lose their satellite TV, right? Yeah, we also, because there are some overlapping coverage zones, we try to get, because the satellites are sort of owned and operated by different international companies, and so we try to get different operators for overlapping satellites. So if one got polluted, we could fall back on the other one or something like that. The satellites people say, well, what happens if the internet connection goes down at the uplink site? So we actually have satellite redundancy for that, because the west uplink is looking at the east downlink. So if the internet connection goes down on the west uplink, which is heading out towards Europe and Africa, then what will happen is the latency will get worse, but it will get the data from the the next satellite over, like it will go up and down and up again, kind of thing. So we want to eventually get another one, like another uplink site in Europe or Asia, so that we can make a full circle. So we've got three ground uplinks, so that if there's internet at any one, then the whole system would keep running. At the moment, it's only double redundancy.
That's so cool. Is that why you named the company Blockstream? And the logo
No, that was like coincidental, but it does seem appropriate in the context. Yeah,
because the logo kind of looks like satellites around the Earth or something.
yeah, that's coincidental. It's like a stream of blocks, I guess.
I mean, this has been great
So
so
question
far, guys.
people-
I appreciate. Yeah, hit us,
Yeah.
Adam. Go.
Yeah, so another question people keep asking is when Jade. We know we're working on supply chain, so we should be able to get back on pre-order within a couple of weeks, hopefully. And yeah, and I guess they're also a nice price point at $40. So our thinking is really that, we want to make it open source compatible so that people can run their own, like build their own. So that might be a way to avoid supply chain risks. And they got the source code so they can submit features or do other things with it, and keep the cost down. So we've managed to make it arguably similar security as a secure element without having the cost of a secure element.
That's pretty cool. Like if you combine a low-cost Raspberry Pi with the Jade in like a package, and there was some kind of Jade app for the Raspberry Pi for the pin backend server, that would be a cool kind of Christmas gift or present for new Bitcoiner friends to help them get started in like a self-sovereign way. And that way they would be able to do like Bitcoin or Liquid Bitcoin or Lightning or even like Tether kind of assets on top of Liquid, all with their same Raspberry Pi and Jade wallet setup, right?
Right. Yeah, there's a number of different. There's a company called Start9, which makes
Right.
like Bitcoin full nodes, and they have some sort of decentralized peer-hosted apps. I think it's like a chat app, and I think they have an Elements node on it, or an option to install one or something.
My understanding is that their full node product doesn't use an external SSD yet, so they use a Prunes Bitcoin D node on the SD card only. So I guess that's to get the cost down, or maybe just make it easier. But I could see why you would want to combine that with like the Jade device to get the overall cost down. And also, we're working on the Mempool Explorer app for the Start9 Labs Raspberry Pi platform. So that would be really cool since they have that Liquid node. We could actually have the Mempool Explorer on both the main chain and Liquid side chain, all on that Raspberry Pi.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of cool that you can run your own block explorer too. So
one-click
Mempool's
installation, yeah.
Yeah. Also good for privacy.
Yeah, originally, like that was the original vision of the project, and we started using the Blockstream fork of Electris for our production server backend. But when we wanted to get it working for home users on Raspberry Pi, it's just too heavy, right? It's meant for like a high performance server, so we had to do a lot of work to kind of get it working with the Roman Z Electris, which can run on a Raspberry Pi, but if you're trying to like explore an address with more than 100 transactions or so, it'll just give up, right? Because it doesn't have that full index.
That's the trade-off. There seems to be a lot of like Electrum. I mean, Electra's being a kind of a backend for indexing Bitcoin data, basically. And there are a few different Electrum personal server. They export like Electrum protocol. So Blockstream's open source Explorer is also an Electrum server. So actually the Aqua wallet is an Electrum client, and it connects to the Blockstream as an Electrum server. But you can point other Electrum clients at Blockstream's Block Explorer actually. But
Right.
in terms of the footprint of the thing, I think it's the fastest and most scalable Electrum server you can get at the moment. But it's a bit of a beast, right? It indexes everything and pre everything, so it chews up a lot and fit in a Raspberry Pi very well. And it's kind of overkill for like a personal use. It's designed to like put on it, throw thousands of user. So yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah,
For
I mean that's
personal
what we
you
use
can
for
use a
the
lighter
production.
thing. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, on Mempool Space, we have several servers running it, and it's just a beast. It's really cool though that it has its own like REST API, and a lot of applications and Bitcoin wallets all integrate, like a lot of transaction broadcast services. A lot of people use this API. I would actually estimate that the Blockstream Electris API that you use on Blockstream's Explorer and that we also use on the Mempool Space Explorer is probably like at least 10 times as popular as the actual Block Explorer website itself, right? Just because of all the other integrations and wallet apps, and also because it's available on the Tor hidden service onion, so anybody can query transactions or addresses in their custom application or broadcast transactions, but over Tor, so their privacy is protected. I think that's really cool, and more people need to run these Explora API servers.
Yeah, I mean, actually, somebody proposed that it wouldn't be that hard to mirror blockchain.info's APIs so that people could run their own blockchain.info kind of, right? Because it has a few REST APIs that are just coincidentally a little bit different to the Explorer ones. But, the Blockstream Explorer has like a send API. You can send transactions through it.
Right.
And I think at times the blockchain.info gets a bit out of date. I think it could be a bit for a node. It doesn't appear to be maintained well at times, so it could be good for people because there are like actual wallets and services that rely on its APIs. So I think it might be good for them to sort of self-host, and so it would be easier for them to self-host if the APIs were the same. So that's the kind of missing feature.
Yeah, that was one of the things that I think contributed to Mempool's app getting so popular, is that for the fee estimation, we implemented the same API as I think earn.com. And then, of course, since we're using your backend, we support the same API as the Blockstream Explorer. So it's nice to be able to now on the Raspberry Pi App Store, distributions, to be able to have normal home users just do like a one-click installation and have that API backend up and running very quickly and very easily. And then now what we're seeing is a lot of wallet apps. I think Spectre supports, of course, they support blockstream.info and mempool.space, but more importantly, they support the next option, which is like self-hosted mempool space backend, right? So you can just point it to your Raspberry Pi. And I think that was kind of like the vision for the project, right? Is to be able to empower individuals to self-host very easily.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I think that self-hosting is good. I mean, sometimes people write kind of web mashup applications, and then they rely on third-party servers and APIs, and they kind of accidentally import trust or service reliability risk, basically.
Have not to change the subject. I know we're getting on like the 3-hour mark, but did you want to talk about bisq a little bit, Matt? I don't know if we still have time.
Yes, just hit us real quick on, and we're gonna have you back, Wiz. So don't worry about it. Don't worry about us missing bisq. But I think it's very important. I think bisq is one of the most important projects in Bitcoin. We've been very clear about that here at Citadel Dispatch. So hit us with it. What is the future of bisq? Where do we have to be concerned, and where are you coming at it?
Well, it's interesting you say bisq is one of the most important projects. It's probably the only project that touches actual fiat money, right? Like all of the other cool Bitcoin projects are kind of like crypto to crypto or layer two or sidechain or basically using almost all cryptography based. And bisq is like the only project that dared to touch actual fiat money. And so it's a really unique challenge to like make bisq work. I mean, for a number of reasons. Like obviously the fiat payment systems in every country are totally different, and every fiat currency has its own markets with their own challenges and stuff. But more so than all that, you're taking all of that and you're trying to implement it in a decentralized and censorship resistant way. And that's like we talked about Liquid a lot and other systems for censorship resistance, but it seems like the on-chain fees are going to pump forever. And so unfortunately, since bisq was developed a very long time ago, it's like over 6 years old now, I think. bisq was developed in this time where the thought of an on-chain fee market was like a very distant future away, and now that it's kind of here, bisq is kind of forced to figure out some scaling options, and understandably, like it's not an easy problem to solve, right? Because bisq users are really enjoying the security and the privacy and the low transaction fees. But now that the fees go up, they're going to have to, like if you want to do $100 trade on bisq, you're not going to spend $20 or $30 for on-chain fees, right? It just totally prices out a lot of these use cases. And so now the users are in this situation where we kind of have to go back to the drawing board and say, okay, well, how can we make bisq version 2, to solve not only the fees issue, but a lot of the other issues that bisq has encountered over the past several years. Maybe we can try to improve the user experience. Maybe we can try and make it more social or more community oriented. And it's a challenge, right? Because everything is a balance. And if you, say you implement support for Liquid as a base layer, as an optional second base layer, then, maybe you have to bootstrap a new market, because now you're not just doing like Bitcoin to USD. You would have to have like an LBTC to USD market. And so, market makers will show up and provide liquidity, but it just gets more and more difficult, right? And then you also have like the technical implementation under the hood. You have to support multiple blockchains now, and that increases like the computational cost. Like bisq is already a pretty heavy app, but now if you add support for a different base layer, you can use more CPU. So then the UX also could suffer. So it's very difficult to solve this problem without really sacrificing some important points. And so it's a difficult problem. And I think the future of bisq, like in the version 2, will probably be more like a generic contract execution system. So maybe the security will even be not part of the basic protocol. This is still like conceptual and being discussed and proposed. But say Matt, you and I want to trade some Bitcoin for some fiat, and we kind of know each other, but we, there's some reputational clout there. Like maybe that, that's like good for some use cases, but bad for privacy, right? Like you want to be able to trade anonymously with other anonymous individuals, but still have security, right? So you want to, maybe you don't want a reputation system, right? Or maybe you want a pseudonymous reputation system. So these are all the kinds of decisions that we're going to have to figure out in version 2. And I think for now, the only real optimizations we can do are obviously adding support for layer 2 stuff like Liquid, which is similar to Bitcoin. So it's not super difficult to add that, but it still is a big challenge. And then optimizing the on-chain usage on the main chain, right? So maybe maybe bisq is still going to be very popular if you want to buy $10,000 worth of Bitcoin. You don't mind paying 20 or 30 bucks, right? But for the $100 trades, maybe those guys will decide to go to Liquid or some other some other venues. So it's a really tricky problem to solve, right?
Yep.
I thought Adam was going to jump in there. I look, I 100% agree. I think bisq is, like I said, I think it's one of the most important projects that we have in the space. I appreciate you going into detail about it, because I feel like people take it for granted. People don't realize what the stakeholders of each of these projects put forward to make those projects what they are. And at the end of the day, like, we can talk all about censorship resistance, we can talk about distribution, but it comes down to people. Like, people are running this shit, right? And if you talk about it at scale, people are running shit, man. And they're vulnerable. Wiz is one of those people. And he just fucking throws himself out there. So I appreciate everything he fucking does. I appreciate what bisq what the stakeholders at bisq are working on. And I look forward to what they have in store for us. I would say to you, Wiz, is I look forward to seeing you in Miami. We're going to have a live. So the bisq needs to transition, basically. bisq needs to transition from a low fee environment to a high fee sustained environment. And that's going to be a messy transition, but it's a transition that has to happen. And we are going to watch that happen here at Dispatch. And we're going to try and explain where all the stakeholders are coming from, basically. Would you agree, Wiz?
Yeah, you raised a good point. It's like, I don't think anyone appreciates like the amount of hard work by really smart people at Blockstream that went into like the Element sidechain project, and how much work goes into coordinating the Liquid Federation, or how much hard work went into the bisq project. Like, everyone kind of naturally takes the tools for granted, or the on-chain fees, like the low fee environment, for granted. Everyone takes the security of Bitcoin for granted, right? It's just so easy to do right now, like 5-sat, on-chain transaction and have it confirmed. But once those fees get up, people get really, yeah. And that's actually the stated mission of the mempool project, is to help the Bitcoin community transition to a multi-layer ecosystem, right? Where we have these layer 2 or even layer 3 systems that enable new use cases like Liquid and bisq, new banking, right? You can do peer-to-peer lending, or you can do trading of different fiat currencies, even, right? That's the real future, because in my opinion, KYC is the illicit activity, right? And all of these layer 2 and layer 3 banking systems basically implement similar banking services that you would get from a traditional fiat bank, but without KYC, right?
Should we do it? Should we do it? Adam, check this out.
many places to buy Bitcoin. They collect your personal information and jeopardize your privacy. KYC is the illicit activity. bisq is open source. It does not collect user data. You keep your private keys, create or take offers to trade peer-to-peer, and keep your Bitcoin private and secure.
I love that. Shout out to Pedro.
Couldn't help myself.
The awesome designer who made that. Yeah, and I think that's the real future, right? Of all of this hard work is that we get to rebuild the banking system on our own terms using cryptography and decentralized systems, and we get to decide what is the correct balance of security and privacy and censorship resistance and cost and speed and user experience. Like, we get to build all of these new things, and it's honestly, it's like sometimes it's a thankless job, right? Like when you see these trolls on Twitter saying Liquid is a shit coin or bisq, it's like, come on guys, like we're trying to build a new system for everyone here, and it has challenges like any other project, but even more challenges because you're trying to build something in a decentralized way, in a censorship resistant way, where the government's going to not be happy about what you're building, right? And Adam is the OG cypherpunk here, he's been doing it longer than any of us, like printing source code on t-shirts, right? And all kinds of crazy stuff. This war is not a new war, right? It's all about freedom for the people, and freeing them not only from fiat debt slavery, but also from mass surveillance and capital controls and all of these horrible things. So we're doing this for the community, and maybe have a little bit more respect for one another, developers in the space. Like, let's not troll each other so much. We're all on the same team here. If one project is making a privacy enhancing tool, that's great. Like, let's collaborate and work together. Let's not troll each other and fight with one another. It's just a waste of all of our time. We should be working together because we're all on the same team.
$100%. 100%. Fuck yes. Adam, appreciate you coming on the show. I think the show has been fantastic. I think this was a great episode of Dispatch. I think it perfectly fits episode 20. It's been a long time, guys. It's been a long time, freaks. Every Bitcoin Tuesday, I think of you guys. And we're going to continue this forever because you support the show. It's 100% community funded. We don't have sponsors. We don't have ads. And you guys make it what it is. Adam, thank you for joining us. You're a fucking legend. We appreciate everything you do. You have any final comments for the freaks before we end this? Very quiet.
Is Adam there?
Oh no, I was muted. Sorry. Yeah. No. So thanks for having me on. I think the more privacy and fungibility in Bitcoin layer 1 and layer 2 is going to be interesting to see, and we want to see it. So let's see how that goes.
Fuck yes.
Yeah, I think what you said earlier, Matt, is the way I try to do all the projects is that I work on is exactly that same model. No altcoins, no advertisements, no you can't degrade any of that things. No KYC, right? Like, that's the real important thing, is to give the community exactly what it wants, and that's what this show is. And that's what all the projects that Blockstream is putting out, and all of the community projects. It's just for the people.
Yeah, I mean, to be 100% clear, I've decided that our future is going to be dominated by free open source projects. And I mean, when I say dominated, I mean we will fail. We will be in a horrible situation if we don't have free open source projects there to support us. And I want to run this show as a free open source project. And as a result, there will be no ads, no sponsors. I want this to be 100% community funded. I also want to announce that we've officially launched opensats.org, the proper Bitcoiner free open source foundation. It is called OpenSats Initiative, but we are a foundation, but we're an initiative. And the idea is that you can contribute as a Bitcoiner, you contribute, and we're going to provide it to open source projects, all free open source projects, not quote unquote open source projects, free open source projects. We have a very strong board. We will argue and we will make sure that your sats go to the right place. And even if you donate fiat, we will automatically convert that over to Bitcoin and hold that as Bitcoin. All grants will be provided in sats. So that's opensats.org. Literally officially launched as of 45 minutes ago. And we're about to go really fucking hard. This is an initiative that I've been very excited about, but I had to be very quiet about. So there you go. I want to do a big thanks for Adam Back for joining us. Big thanks for Wiz for joining us a second time. I love you both. Thank you for all the work you've done. You're my people. Appreciate you both. Thank you for joining. This has been fantastic.
Thanks a lot, Matt.
Thanks.
Cheers, guys. I love you, freaks. That was a fucking great fucking dispatch. For the record, I'm going to be bringing a bunch of hats to Bitcoin Miami, Bitcoin 2021, June 4th, 5th. So if you want a hat, reach out to me on Keybase or Telegram. I will mail them out as well, if you must. If you're not going to be there, it'll be a shame. But I will mail them out. So just reach out to me on Telegram or Keybase, and I will send you a Lightning invoice, and we'll make it happen. If you want a dispatch hat. Besides that, quinsolo.com, QUINSOLO.com has a Citadel Dispatch fucking flask that is up for a giveaway. And the only way you can get it is if you message in the Sphinx tribe of Citadel Dispatch, the Citadel Dispatch Sphinx tribe. The first one to message stack or die gets it. So cheers to all of you. Appreciate all you guys who came in and listened to this. And stay humble, stack sats. I'll see you guys on Thursday for Rabbit Hole Recap, and I'll see you next Tuesday for the next Bitcoin Tuesday Citadel Dispatch. Love you all. Peace.